Okay, good evening. I'm going to call the meeting to order, and I'd like to welcome you to the Coeur d'Alene School District Board meeting for August 5th, 2019. Would the gentlemen please remove their hats, and everyone please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, again, welcome and thanks for being here. It's nice and cool in here, so maybe you're here because you don't have air conditioning at home. Just need a cool place. Before we get going, I'll just go ahead and introduce our participants up front here, and I'll start with to my far right. And tonight we have Miss Pam Westberg, who is our acting clerk of the board, and for Miss Lynn Town, who's not here tonight. And then Dr. Steve Cook, our superintendent. To my immediate left is Lisa May, our vice chair. Tom Hearn, trustee. Tamber Pickford, trustee, and Jen Brumley, trustee. My name's Casey Morser. I'm the board chair. Public comment on district-related items is scheduled near the start of the meeting. Please sign in on the sheet provided at the entrance door. Because of the diversity of issues, members of the board will not respond to public comment made during tonight's meeting. Instead, issues may be recorded and referred to the proper staff person for follow-up. Comments may also be submitted to the board in writing through our clerk. Okay, is there a motion to approve tonight's agenda?
So moved. Second.
Okay, it was moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. I do just want to point out, when we get down to item D, which is an action item on the preschool facility, I'm going to be recusing myself from that discussion tonight. That happens, the location of that building is at the church where my family goes to church, and so I'm going to stay out of that conversation, and Lisa's going to run that little section. So, and I'll bring that up again when we get there. Dr. Cook, you are next up, sir.
All right, let's do a board recognition. This month, on behalf of the Board of Trustees, we want to recognize an organization and an individual with a long track record of championing literacy and supporting young readers here in Kootenai County. I'd like to invite Karen Yother up here at this time. And please watch the screen as well, because we're going to be showing some photos here. You guys got that in there, I hope. Karen is the Youth Services Coordinator for the Community Library Network, and this fall she will mark 22 years in that role. Congratulations. For those who don't know, the Community Library Network provides library services countywide outside of Coeur d'Alene. That includes libraries in Hayden, Post Falls, Rathdrum, Spirit Lake, Athol, Pinehurst, and Harrison, as well as the Bookmobile. As Youth Services Coordinator, Karen oversees programs and services. There we go. Karen oversees programs and services for infants through teens. Much of that is through community outreach, including activities that directly support students in Coeur d'Alene Public Schools. Let me tell you just a few examples. Around the holidays, Karen and the Library Network have provided title programs for Atlas and Skyway Elementary Schools and Northwest Expeditionary Academy at the Hayden Library. These support our literacy initiatives with free books, STEM activities, and making sure the kids have library cards. In June, Karen and her crew joined us on the last day of school at Family Day in the Park, kicking off their summer reading program, A Universe of Stories. Also this summer, Karen and 3 others from the Library Network provided STEM learning activities every Monday during the school district's CdA Reads program. They also served as reading buddies on those days. This is the 5th summer the Library Network has shown up to support our summer reading program. And to keep the momentum from CdA Reads going into the fall, the Hayden Library is planning to host a fun family event at the end of September to promote continued parental involvement, encouraging and celebrating literacy. We look very much forward to being up there and supporting that. Kate Keinert, wave your hands, Kate. Wave, everybody. There, everybody say hi to Kate. Our Director of Equity and Federal Programs praises Karen for being so positive, creative, kind, and enthusiastic. I'm quoting Kate here when I say, Karen is fun to work with and just be around. Her outreach has brought together various stakeholders and brought about a number of positive collaborations between the Community Library Network and the school district. Karen, we want you and the Community Library Network to know just how much we value this partnership and look forward to continuing this collaboration on behalf of the students we serve. All right. Let me read this award. On behalf of the Coeur d'Alene Public Schools Board of Trustees, we'd like to present you with this Inspiration Award for opening the world of books, sparking the imaginations of countless young minds, and engaging families in a love of reading through the tireless efforts of the Community Library Network and its youth service programs. Picture? Cool. All right, we'd love to hear from you too, Karen.
Well, first, thank you, and thank you, Kate. It is such a pleasure for us to work with the school district to support your efforts, your literacy and STEM efforts. Our team has so much fun when they come out. It's like the highlight of our week. It's that or statistics and board reports. So we get to come and hang out with your kids, support your efforts, and hopefully make a difference for kids. So thank you.
Well, we're excited for the partnership as well, and we just want to remind everybody that this is a community effort. If you are going to take on literacy and create an environment in which we want to have every kid in our community have a love for reading, that's for all of us to find ways to engage in. So we're just very thankful for the partnership, and we hope that it continues for a very, very long time. Thank you, Karen. That's it for recognitions. Yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah, why not? Let's take this awkward moment I would like to introduce one of our new cabinet staff members who's actually here tonight. So everybody turn very quietly to the right and look. Second person over in the blue. I'd like to introduce Katie Grotmann. She is our new Director of Curriculum for the district. We are extremely excited to have her here. I'll tell you, I think the person sitting next to her is going to get to offload a little bit of work on her. And so I think he's very glad as well. Welcome, Katie Grotmann. We're very excited to have her a part of our team.
Yes, welcome, Katie. Thanks for being here. Let's see. Next up is board trustee comments, and it looks like Lynn put one down for me, but didn't tell me. But I can wing this. So about a week and a half ago was the Idaho School Board Association Summer Leadership Institute training for Region 1, which is northern Idaho. And it was held in this building, and Jim Brumley and I were there with about 40 or 50 other trustees and superintendents from around the region, and had some great information. There was a presentation from State Department of Education about data analytics, basically, looking at your data and different ways to look at it. There was the chief of fire from the city of Meridian that came up with the Office of School Safety, Building Safety. I can never remember the title of that office in the governor's office, but they just talked about school safety and some initiatives that they're working on. And then it was kind of a roundtable of just different laws that have changed and just different things that are going on. So it was good information, and if you guys have questions, we can share with you what we got. They're going to email it out to us, and I don't think they've done that yet, but maybe we'll pass it along when they do. Okay. Let's see, next up is going to be public comment. Okay, so before we start public announcement, I just want to remind the public that while this is a meeting of the Board of Trustees that takes place in public, it is not a meeting with the public. It is a meeting of the board to conduct district business. The board does allow some limited public comment on district-related items. Those wishing to address the board during the public comment period are limited to one comment, not to exceed 3 minutes. If you have additional comments, you may submit those through the clerk of the board, Ms. Lynn Town, and Ms. Town will ensure that the board members receive that additional commentary. Please keep in mind board members will not respond to public comment. If I determine that an individual statement is too lengthy, personally directed, abusive, or repetitive, I may terminate that speaker's privilege to address the board. Okay, and with all that fun stuff said, our only person signed up tonight is Lillian Smith. Is that correct? Okay, welcome, Lillian. If you'll just go over to the podium there. If you haven't been with us before, just adjust the mic so it's at the right height, and you want to push the red button and make sure the light comes on there. And then I'll just kind of watch the time a little bit, and if we're getting close to 3 minutes, I'll try to give you a friendly notice.
Okay, thank you.
You bet.
Can I just start whenever I'm ready? Okay, thank you. Good evening. I am Lillian Smith, a rising junior at Coeur d'Alene High School and vice president of my junior class. I'm here today to propose the idea of having a student school board member, a choice that hundreds of school districts around the country and the majority of U.S. states have made. Recently, the CdA school system has gone through an audit revealing the issues of our school district. Now, you as a school board are tasked with approving policies for the problems we as part of the CdA school community are facing. A high school school board member is a wonderful idea because students are able to express ideas for solutions that adults not currently in school are not. We are also able to see how practical and realistic certain proposals might be because we understand the school environment. A student school board member is valuable because it will give young people in our community the opportunity of leadership and education. Furthermore, a student on the school board is like a plebeian on the Roman Senate. We can represent the student body and voice their concerns and long-term solutions. They will provide student perspective on important decisions the school board faces. Other successful school districts have had the following rules concerning student school board members. Student board members do not have a vote but can record an opinion to be included in the minutes for the meeting. Student board members do not participate in executive sessions or any matters involving personnel decisions. Student board members serve for 1 year and are selected by an application process. Student board members are usually seniors. Reasons to have a student board member include many other boards in CdA, including the Child Care Commission, CdA TV Committee, Parking Commission, Ped Bike Committee, Urban Forestry Committee, Parks and Rec Commission, Library Board, and Arts Commission are all actively seeking high school students. They recognize the importance of a student voice in their decisions, and having a student voice in the school board, which affects the place most students spend the majority of their time, is all the more important. Springfield, Los Angeles, Philadelphia, Salt Lake City, and hundreds of other school boards have student board members and have experienced great success in this decision. As a leader in student council, I would be happy to take responsibility for publicizing this opportunity at the student body at CHS. I also have a handout that includes policies for student board positions in other districts. Thank you so much for your time. I hope you will consider my proposal. As one current student board member said, school systems are constantly telling students that you should care about your community and be well-versed in topics, and you should want to make a difference. I think that means I can take what I see in my own classroom and actually make a difference. Thank you.
Thank you, Lillian. And you said you have some information you're going to give to us? Yeah, if you want to just bring that up, you can give it to Miss Westberg here, and she'll get it to us. And thanks for coming down here in the summer. That was actually something when Dr. Olson was here that he talked about. The Boise School District, I believe, has a student representative, or they did before. So I think it's great to hear. It's great that a student brought it to us. So something to ponder in the future here. So. Okay. Next up is our consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve tonight's consent agenda items A through L? Okay, it was moved and seconded. Any discussion on those? Okay, all in favor? Aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Motion carries. Ms. Westberg. And next up is Ms. Ebner with our finance report, finance presentation. Good evening.
Good evening. We've been busy at work in the finance department closing out the books, and so I've just got a few updates for you all. Our first item here is our report of residual equity transfers. If you all recall, we've put into policy that we are to notify the board in writing about transfers of residual equity over $100,000. And what I did, I just put all of the significant transfers that we know of at this time. There will be more as we continue to close out the books. We're still paying invoices on our federal grants, so we don't want to make our indirect transfers before all the costs are in, as those are based on actual costs for the year. But the first item here is our required bus fund depreciation transfer. And so the State Department takes all of our buses, puts them on a schedule for depreciation, and then each year we take that schedule and we calculate what we should be moving from our general fund into our transportation fund. And the state actually includes this as part of our transportation reimbursement payment. And the next line item is required for our district. Years ago, we increased the levy amount in order to fund buses, and the amount was set at $600,000. So we're moving that amount each year into our bus fund to purchase, 7 buses? I think it's 7 buses a year. 6 buses. The next line item also required the federal nutrition program requires that the general fund, pay for the FICA and Medicare expenses. So we calculate that at year end and we transfer that from the general fund into the food service account. The next one is something that was a board decision, and this was actually last summer, about this time last summer, but it's going to be on our FY19 books, and so we're reporting it here with the rest of our transfers, even though it was decided last summer. And that first one there is the $468,000 for development of the Prairieland. We had purchased the Prairieland earlier, and the development of the land in order to get it ready to build the new Nexa school needed to take place, and there were not funds in the bond project fund for that. So School Plus was identified, the residual equity in that fund was identified in order to pay for that. $200,000 was also transferred from School Plus in order to make up the $0.2 million of the $1.2 million purchase for the Hutter property. So $1 million came from the bond, and then the $200,000 came from School Plus. And finally, we have one item that, if you recall last year, we had another situation where purchases were made early in the spring and the items were not delivered until after July 1, which means that the invoices will be charged to July 1. However, that will artificially inflate our fund balance if we don't try to address it by what we did last year, and it worked out pretty well, was we just transferred the funds to the tech fund in order to then pay the invoices out of that fund. So that way it's not artificially inflating our fund balance. And we know that the money's committed, so it just makes it a little bit more clean for year end. So we are reporting that transfer as well. Any questions on those?
I do. Okay, so I have just a question on the first item there, the $257,000.
Yes.
For the bus depreciation.
Yeah.
So that's from the state.
Yeah.
For transportation, they pay it into our general fund, and then we're transferring it out of the general fund into
Right.
the bus account.
Yep.
And that fund, that's into the asset purchase account, or
So the
or we're
bus
using it to pay
fund-
those lease payments from a couple years ago where we leased the buses, or
Right. So the State Department requires us to have a separate fund for all bus purchases and lease to purchase scenarios. And so it's Fund 424 in our district, which is a capital fund. And the state likes us to record the whole transportation payment into the general fund and then move it from the general fund into the bus fund. I think just, we could record a portion of the payment less this amount. However, the state reports it as a lump sum. And so for consistency's sake, it's probably just continued that way.
Yeah, it's just interesting, I guess. A lot of folks think the state pays for our buses, right? And so $250,000 buys about 2.5 buses.
Right.
And with 66 buses or whatever we have, and we say they go out of service about 10 to 12 years, depending on the mileage. So we need to buy around 6 or 7 buses a year. So
Yes.
the state's
Yeah.
you know,
And
they're
that-
helping us with about 2.5 buses a year, and which is why we have the other 600,000 there, because we need to play some catch up. And
Right. We calculated it out. It's about 75% of a bus that they reimburse. So the problem that the district has run into is during the recession, our bus fleet was older and the payments are front loaded. So it depreciates very quickly in the beginning, and then, you know, you come down to a smaller balance. And so when we had an older fleet, the depreciation payments were very small. We couldn't maybe even afford one bus with our depreciation payment. So as we are putting our levy funds into getting our fleet back fully onto this depreciation schedule, we should be in a really good situation where we are getting that depreciation, but you just have to keep up with it. So if they're not reimbursing the full cost of a bus, you're not going to be able to keep up with your fleet. So,
and do they reimburse based on the cost we bought the bus for? So let's say we bought the buses this year, they're around $100,000 a piece. Are they,
Yeah.
that's what they base the reimbursement off of? Or?
it's close. Like the beginning amount is close because we buy them off of the state contract. So they figure out what the specs are and then they have the contract. And so, but the problem is that it's then adjusted down to the, you know, more the 75% figure. So.
Thank you.
Kate, I just had two quick questions. One, when do you think we'll be close to caught up? We're getting, like, in the next year or two, do you think, or we'll be kind of back on track with our depreciation? I know last year I feel like we talked about a date that we'd be closer, that it wouldn't be as big.
I mean, with the 7 buses per year, I mean, how many buses do we have in our fleet? I guess maybe we can look into this
That's
question
okay.
a
I was
little
just
bit
kind
more
of curious, but it seems like we're
give
doing a great
report
job
of-
and we're getting closer.
Yeah, the nice thing is as these depreciation payments are higher, we're looking at the situation where we can buy more than 7 buses.
Right.
So that is definitely what our goal is. We're not trying to, you know, stockpile funds in this. We want to get our buses all as up to date as possible.
Definitely. The next question is actually just something to make life a little bit easier for me as I'm reviewing the board packet. When we're looking at the district spreadsheet of expenditures, would it be possible just to add a column? You know, you give us that nice table that says the fund and then what it is.
Right.
So instead, general fund 100.
Yep.
Could we just code those expenditures
fund.
so in its own little column? It would make it easier. You know, sometimes when you see these large amounts, and then if you're able to say, oh yeah, that is for this, you know, from this fund, it makes it just a little bit easier.
We may be able to do that. It just depends on how those are being reported from the report that's built. So it may be pulling from more than one database that isn't linked. So for example, the fund, an invoice or a check paid to a vendor may be a number of funds. For example, I can think of Staples, for example. We are going to be paying a check to them out of a number of funds, but maybe there's a way to just list all those funds if the database is smart enough to
It wasn't too
do that.
cumbersome, or if it was just for a large expenditure,
Right.
that might be helpful.
Okay, we can definitely look into doing that.
Thank you.
I believe I pulled up the policy.
It's
I'd have to
100,000.
look at it again. I thought it was 100,000.
For transfers, on contracts, it's 50,000. So
Yes.
contracts over 50,000, we have to approve. But that was a change we made last year. If you recall, prior to this change for this year, there was no policy and they didn't have to notify us of transfers between the accounts. And I think we talked about it. Katie came up with some language, and I think we settled on 100,000 made sense. And it's a cumulative 100,000.
Yes, so it can't be, you know, like 20,000 every month. It's for the whole fiscal year, so. Okay, just want to run some items that have come up as we are getting everything reconciled and tied out, are items that are going to affect our fund balance. So if you recall, during the budget building process, I reported that fund balance was expected to, at least we were supposed to break even, if not maybe end with a modest surplus. And so here are some items that I feel that will affect fund balance. There may be more that will kind of move the needle in either direction, but as I'm finding them, I want to make sure that I call them out. So The first item are, these are two items from our curriculum budget. The first, lynda.com, is a resource that we were using. I believe it is online courses. And that program was owned by LinkedIn. They decided to discontinue the program, LinkedIn did. So they just wrote us a check for $88,000. So we plan to replace that resource. So it does kind of report differently. It reports in an awkward way because it's going to increase our fund balance as we end the year, but we plan to replace it. So it's just something that you'll want to keep in mind when you're looking at our financial statements. The next one is our writing units of study. That's a large purchase that was made later than expected, much like the technology purchase that I just mentioned. It was planned to be as part of FY19 budget. The purchase is being made later, or the items aren't going to make it before the fiscal year end. So that will be included in fund balance, although we know that the money is really committed. However, tech has its own fund in order to deal with these sorts of situations. Curriculum, we run all of that through the general fund, so we're just going to let that artificially inflate fund balance, and we'll just have to look at the financial statements with that in mind. So that's about $225,000. Okay, and
Katie,
then yeah.
Katie, sorry to interrupt. When that happens, is it possible to footnote kind of in our budget document or our audit?
Yeah.
Just so we remember, in 4 years from
Right,
now or 5
right.
years, we go, oh yeah, that was high because of this. Or
So that's one of the main concerns. That's why it gives me a little bit of heartburn when these things come up, because it's great for me to stand up here and explain. It makes sense. But 4 years later, when we're looking at the statements, like, wow, fund balance was really just growing and growing and growing that year, and it's you don't have the same information, you don't have the narrative that goes with it. We are allowed to do fund balance designations, so we can say that this amount is committed. However, the different types of reports that we put together an annual report for the state. We also report, we run a budget summary, budget to actual summary in the newspaper. Those reports don't allow us to do designations, but we will certainly do that for our audit this year.
yeah, I could see it being helpful with
Yeah.
negotiations, right?
For sure,
'Cause
yeah.
you look at financials from 3 or 4 years ago and say,
Yeah.
see, you're underestimating expenses and there's more revenue.
Yes, yeah, no, that's
Good to have that in there.
very valid. Any other questions on this? Okay, we've received our July 15th payment, which is kind of when we know what we made in the prior year. And for the entitlement, which is our discretionary, it's based off of best 28 weeks units. That was what was still hanging. And we did come in 2 units lower than we expected. We expected 507 units, and it came in at 505 and change. So that was a disappointment. However, luckily that doesn't move the needle as much as our salary-based apportionment. So we were very close on salary-based apportionment. That's fabulous news. Benefit apportionment as well. And then transportation support is higher. Part of that is because we have more depreciation, but not all. And so that put in our variance to budget of a positive just under $250,000. So that will affect fund balance. But in the next breath, unless there's questions, we are looking at our special education costs. It's no news that each year these costs come in higher to meet the needs of our students. And this year, just comparing the total of what we code to our special education program across all funds was $600,000 higher than prior year. And this was anticipated, most of it. But we anticipated charging it all to Medicaid because we wanted to balance our general fund. So, it's one thing to plan to charge it all to Medicaid. just as, this is what we're going to do because we need to meet the needs of our students. However, when we're in a situation where we get a little bit more in our state funding than expected, we probably need to think about carrying the burden a little bit, especially when we added 3.5 positions to Medicaid. And that continues to be, we just need to keep in mind, try to be responsible with our Medicaid funds as we look to it for our stability within our special education program. So these are all developing at this time. So we're doing a lot of work to get our final year-end balances, and just taking these events isolated by themselves is not enough to say, okay, I can start making decisions based on fund balance. We definitely need to wait until we have all the information, we have the final numbers, and then we can start making decisions. Any questions?
So I just want to make sure I was understanding what you were saying there. So in regards to that, where state revenue is a little higher than anticipated, if that pans out that way and expenses come in where you think they're coming in, you would recommend that we use at least some of that money to pay some of that instead of all $600,000 out of the Medicaid account? Is that what you're saying?
So if you remember back at the budget summit, Medicaid was a big piece of that because it balanced our budget with transfers. And we decided in that meeting, or we discussed this, and there wasn't any bad feedback, that the plan was to set up contracted services time and time again is the line item that is over budget. And we decided, or we discussed setting a budget in the general fund for we can pay for this much contracted services, and then anything above that is just going to get charged to Medicaid. So if we were to follow this course of action, we would end up with a surplus potentially, we're still, getting everything together, in the general fund. However, we're having Medicaid pay for, taking more than its share of the burden, or, that's not quite true. But we are operating as if we're in crisis mode, even though we're not really crisis mode in the general fund. Does that make sense?
Katie, do we anticipate that Medicaid reimbursement will remain similar this coming year? I mean, you guys been notified of any changes at a state level, or even?
No, we are expecting Medicaid reimbursement to be the same at this point, so as this year, and so we had a little bit of a bump this year too. So, due to just additional billing, and we've now increased because there's been items identified that could be billed that there wasn't enough time. We've increased hours that will pay for themselves with our Medicaid assistance. So,
Katie, maybe take an opportunity to talk about contracted services. Maybe it's even Frank too, about the cost of contracted services versus the cost of an employee, and how we try to do the best to mitigate that. If essentially, in theory, what we would always want is our own employees. We can do that at a cheaper rate than we can for contracted services because you're paying for the other employer's costs as well. And so, Frank, maybe just talk a second about that and how we're trying to drive those costs down, but also there's a point of which it gets tighter and tighter each time.
Yeah, so contracted services are always going to cost more because they pay the actual employee a little bit more because they don't do benefits, they don't pay for anything else. So they have to have a higher per hour rate. So what we're trying to do is anytime we can replace a contracted person by hiring a district person, we're trying to move in that direction. The problem with contracted services, well, I don't know if it's a problem, but it's a difficulty, is that when problems arise, our hands are kind of tied. We can't do much with a contracted person. We can't discipline, we can't do anything else. So what we're trying to do is replace that with a district employee so we can produce our own employees and work towards better services for our students.
Frank, could you clarify contracted services? Are we talking about speech or?
It could be a number of things. It could be a
okay.
speech pathologist. It could be an occupational therapist. It could be a physical therapist. It could be a BI pro, a BI para. It could be a number of things. So
Okay.
any opportunity we've had to replace a contracted service person with a district employee, we've been trying to move in that direction.
And there was one in the board packet today in our personnel memo, I think, that I
Yes.
saw. Can't remember what position, but there was.
There was a physical therapist we're transferring over and a occupational therapist. which alone those 2 contracts were a lot. So that was a good move.
Thank you, Frank.
And I didn't hear this mentioned. We're doing that whenever possible. However, sometimes the job market, the pool isn't. Did he already say that? You guys are laughing. Okay. Wasn't paying attention. All right. Any other questions?
Doesn't look like it. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, next we're into action items, and first action item up is our 2019-2020 bus route approval. And I see Jill.
We've got an entire squad here, so I'm going to turn it over to Jeff, and Jeff's going to bring Jill and Tom up, and I think we've got kind of a joint. I'm not sure who else is presenting.
I'm going to actually kind of pass the baton on this one, but I'm going to introduce Jill Hill, Director of Transportation, and she's going to come up and present the bus routes as you guys normally need to approve per state code. And then we're going to use this opportunity to talk about TransFinder and just kind of share some of the highlights. So that's one of the new computer-aided programs that we're going to start using. And we've got a team here, and I'll let Jill introduce the team that she's brought. And they're really excited to share that with you.
Hi there. Good evening, board members. Dr. Cook, Ms. Westberg. Thank you guys very much for allowing transportation to be here. I'm sorry, I'm recovering from a little bit of a cold, and so I'm going to talk very little tonight. But I did was kind of just bring it into the loop as to we've had a fantastic year in transportation. I need to let you know with the hard work that's being done over there. Everything's going really good. But to start our year out, we're going to start our year out with a total of 85 staff members. That includes office personnel, mechanics, bus drivers, aides. So there's 85 of us over there holding down transportation. It's a really good group of people we have going on over there. This year we're going to have a total of 50 routes, and we'll have 41 of those are going to be general education routes. And we're going to have 9 special ed routes this year to get us going. Currently, if the board approves all the routes, we'll be posting 4 vacant positions, and those will be called our sub-rovers. But anyway, we'll be posting those in 1 aide position. So if we get your approval, then we'll get those posted and get those seats filled. And then just as far as the mileage goes this year, we're right on target. We're being pretty consistent and have been over the last 5 to 8 years. We're running roughly 650,000 miles a year. This last year we came in at 646,873 miles this last year. So it's really nice to see the consistency there with the mileage that we're doing. And then we're also running about 100,000 gallons of fuel a year, so that's been pretty consistent. The exciting thing that we have going on this year, though, is we do have our TransFinder program. And so in our transportation department, we have brought Yvonne Trotter on. She is now going to be our routing specialist, and she's also going to be our special needs trainer for our district in the transportation department. But she's been working very hard and very closely with Tom Hobson. Tom Hobson came in as a consultant. He has knowledge with the Skyward program, which is our student database, and it plays well with the TransFinder program. So he was the perfect person to bring in. So with that being said, I'm going to turn this over to Tom and Yvonne, and hopefully they can show you our new exciting program.
Good evening, board. Dr. Cook. My name is Yvonne, and I've been a special needs bus driver for the last 4 years, and I'm really excited to have the opportunity to work and learn about TransFinder and implement it in our department. I'm going to go through just a few points of the program. Route Finder, it's an electric routing software. It's integrated with our current attendance zone software. It's also updated nightly from Skyward.
new laptop.
Alrighty, so I'm going to go through some benefits, including the proactive planning, real-time updates of student information, new subdivision planning, ability to see actual student locations, ability for what-if planning, which will help with attendance zone studies and change in academic programs, faster and more efficient responses to changing, including road closures, police emergencies, better mapping capabilities, more accurate student locations for pickup and drop-offs, more up-to-date road maps versus the not so updated sometimes Google Maps that we were using. It also allows us to have better parent communication. Parents have the ability to look up their busing information based on their address. Parents can be notified of any changes via the bulletin or mass email that we can send out. The Route Finder software also provides us with better reporting, summary reports with driving instructions for route sheets, detailed reports with student stop assignments and student information. We can more accurately account for bus riding students, and reporting is based on actual information versus the Word documents we were doing, and so which provides just more accurate route sheets for the drivers. And now I'll turn it over to Tom so he can give you kind of a visual of our route sheets. Okay.
Good evening, everyone. As Yvonne said, the software gives a lot more capabilities. This is a typical trip summary route sheet that the driver could work off of, or if we have a sub-driver covering for the driver, it's got all your, turn left here, go this direction, or this distance, and we can also have the ability to put in a bunch of notes, like you can look down at the 6:36 a.m. Southeast Way and whatever that street is. But we can put in comments like just after the Honda dealership, right by the mailboxes, across the street from such and such. We have crossers here, those kinds of things. So it's a real good aid for the driver, or especially for the substitute driver. And then this is a new capability that they're really excited about. Is the beginning of the school year, the drivers in the past, through the bus registration forms, have had to kind of gather their own information for what students were getting on at what stops, what the contact information was for those students. Now, and I'll show you in a second how the software gathers that information as far as what students come to what stops. But now the part that's blacked out is actually the student name and their phone number. And on the left-hand side of that is their address. And on the right-hand side, it's the school they go to and what grade they're in. So right off the bat, the driver knows at this stop, I'm supposed to pick up these students, and here's their contact information for them, which is a great benefit to our drivers. So now what I want to do is go ahead and bring up, like I said, new laptop, sorry about that. Oh, I hate this. Got dual screens going, so pardon me for a second. Okay, so this is would be a route. This particular one happens to be Hayden Meadows, and it's the AM route. But one of the things that we're able to do, is on here is we can actually do a comparison with the route or the where the kids are, that's all the red dots that you see out there. And then we can actually add as a layer on here the attendance zone. Oops. Well, this isn't going quite what I wanted to do. What it allows you to do, and I think it's because the laptop went to sleep, but what it allows you to do is we can actually add in the attendance zone, because like Yvonne said, it's another component of the same software. And then we can also add in the walk zone, the 1.5-mile walk zone. So basically then everything that's left in between the two boundaries is the area that we need to pick up kids and bus into the school. And so this like Yvonne said earlier too, it gives you a much better representation of where all the kids are and how many kids are at each stop, and to include, it doesn't like going to sleep evidently, but who those kids, like you saw on the detailed sheet, who each one of those kids are at each stop as they come in. And we'll talk about how that's going to affect some of the communication and stuff later on with parents and how we're doing things. Speaking of talking about the parents being able to get their address or take their address and find out what stop they go to, this is actually active in the district right now with attendance zones. And this is a district website, and a link right off of the district website is the Homeschool site Locator, and that's been active for a number of years. There was a former piece of software that we used when I was with the district a few years ago, and then it's been updated to use the TransFinder software. But this Homeschool site Locator, when it comes up, first thing is there's a bulletin, and it's kind of hard to read off of the screen, but this is where, like Yvonne said, that you can put messages out to the parents. Route number 25 is running a half an hour late today because of snow or ice or an accident on Highway 95 or whatever it is. If there's a 2-hour delay for starting school, you can put, how that's going to affect bus transportation. You can have a constant reminder in here, like we've got posted right now, that Monday pickups are 1 hour later. So it's a way to remind the parents. And that bulletin can be easily changed. This is the same way it was with just the attendance zone. It's 11, what was it?
For the address, we had
848?
1484 North Strayhorn.
484, okay. So they put it in, and when the address comes up, it's always brought in what school it went to. In this case, that particular address goes to Canfield Middle School. But now we're able to transmit up to there all the bus routes, and so as you mouse down, it now shows for that address that if you go to Canfield Middle School, it's East Starling Meadows and North Strahan Road. It's route number 7. And it gets there at 7:03 in the morning. And then you just mouse down further, and that's the afternoon route. Here's the routes for Coeur d'Alene High, because it's a secondary bus. It's the same stops, but when you get down to the elementary, it's actually route number 1, and it's a little bit different stop. So they all get adjusted according to the routes that are out there. And that's going to be a huge advantage to transportation as we get the word out and work with Scott to publicize that this new capability has been expanded on the attendance zone part. It should cut down a lot of phone calls into the schools, into transportation, and into the district office. So what's next? Well, first thing is to get that information from that Info Finder I, that's the name of that module, but the whole how to look it up on your own and be self-sufficient, how to get that word out. And like I said, transportation will be working with Scott to get that publicized and on the district website, and also get the information out to the schools so as parents call, they can let them know that they can get the most up-to-date information out there. Again, one of the nice things about this software package is as routes get changed, that information gets transmitted up to that website, and the parents can get the most up-to-date information. If a bus stop changes or a time changes, they'll see the most up-to-date information. The next thing is it's been a desire of the district to be able to better accurately account for kids getting on and off the bus. There's some attendance taking apps that go with this software that may be appropriate. There's some other compatible software packages that are out there that may be appropriate, but the transportation department will be taking a look at those in the coming year to see what might work, so that, if a parent calls and says, hey, the bus already came past my house, but my kid didn't get off. Do you know if they got on the bus? They can answer those kinds of questions. And then, again, with some of the apps that are out there, looking at some parent apps that they have where the parents could actually find out some of that information, but that gets into, what kind of security is attached to that, because obviously you don't want just anybody being able to check on anybody's kid type of thing. So that's Route Finder and Trans Finder, and Yvonne would be happy to answer any of your questions.
I don't know if I have any questions. It's more really to Jill, I think. I guess I wanted to make a couple comments. One was that I just wanted to find out, well, I guess that is a question, how are you doing as far as hiring bus drivers? That seems to be a chronic problem. Are we doing
always getting new bus drivers in. It can be a challenge sometimes, but we currently do have a class going. We have 4 people in a class, and we're wanting to start one more class. This year we're pretty fortunate. We have a good pool of subs. But working with this many people, filling absences and just meeting the needs of our district, it can be challenging. But to answer your questions, it's always a challenge. I always need bus drivers, just good, solid people that are okay with change and loves our kids just as much as I do. So.
Well, we've tried to raise the pay of the bus drivers, but it's not competitive, of course, with Spokane. So that's been a concern of mine, but I'm glad you're at least filling the positions. The second 2 things are really comments. One was that in the purchases of the new buses, they are continuing to be buses with seatbelts, which
yes.
and that we could have a whole separate discussion on, but I'm glad you're still doing that, and that it seems to, over time, some of the angst and upset about having seatbelts has calmed down a bit from what I've been able to tell. People were pretty upset about it at first. Some of the drivers concerned about liability issues or how it's going to work, how you're going to manage them, blah, blah, blah. And of course, you can speak to that more than I can, but I'm glad that we're still continuing down that road because I think it's the right road. I don't know if you want to comment on that or not, but I have one more thing to say after that.
Well, I think you're right. I think the fear of the unknown in the beginning, it's new, it's shiny. But, there's a huge debate out there with seatbelts or not. Our district is moving forward with it, and our bus drivers are doing a great job enforcing it with their students. And every year, as we're getting our new buses in, there'll be more drivers. We'll be implementing our procedure in it. And so I'm fine with it, and I think most of our drivers are too. So.
Okay. And I'm aware of the controversy over them. On the other hand, we don't have to go down this road again, but rollover and side impact accidents seem to show that kids are safer with seatbelts. The final thing is really more the facility there. What's concerned me for a long time is that you have a really inadequate facility there. It's overcrowded, it's old, you have buses parked down the street because you have no place to park them. I just hope that the board in the future, when we look at bonds again, and I know I've had this discussion, I think, with Dr. Cook, whether we look at upgrading some of our transportation facility, because the bus drivers and staff have been extremely patient with that facility over there, but it is old, it's overcrowded, barely meets the needs. If you need more places to work on the buses, you only have 2 bays or something like that?
We have 2 bays, and you got to remember our 2 bays, they service over 60 buses.
Right.
In addition to that, they take care of the white fleet as well.
Right, all the other vans
And so,
around.
if you have to tear a bus apart, you're going to have to either put it back together and get it out of the way so you can service another vehicle, or be bayless, one bayless for a minute. So it is very challenging, and I'm really glad to hear that, our department is on the radar now, because we're sardines over there.
At least on the radar to me. Hopefully you'll be to the rest of the
Elbow
board.
room over there,
Because you've been extremely patient with this issue. But it's when I go by it, I go, oh my Lord, look at this. They're packed they're all packed in there, and whatever. So anyway, thank you for your good work, and I appreciate if you continue your being patient, at least about your facility anyway. And
Oh, thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
thank you.
Okay, any other questions for Jill and company? I have just one in regards to the routes. It's hard to compare routes, without doing a lot of work, going back and looking at previous year's routes. But were there big changes just with the new routing software, or pretty
The
similar?
thing I'm really looking forward to is that I really strive on the safety of our kids first, obviously, but then we need to be efficient, and then just a good, smooth, safe flow for our drivers. And so what this route finder program is doing, you put the information in there and it'll come up with a suggested route. And you might say, oh, wow, that's a great idea. Or we still have the ability to go in and tweak it the way we need to. So I'm kind of looking forward to see what efficiencies will get created out of this. But as far as like the stop locations and stuff go, the stop locations are going to all be in the same place as usual. Again, if we haven't used a stop location in a whole year, we may take it off. But if somebody moves in, we can always add one back or make an adjustment if we need to. But it's going to be so much more clear, and it's going to be here so people can see it instead of here and trying to remember everything. It's good. So.
And then how about in regards to the areas that are payment in lieu? So the areas we don't service, that stay the same?
Yes. I don't believe there were any changes to the in lieu areas. So everything in your board packet should be current and up to date. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Okay, there's a motion in the first page of that section of the packet there.
Yeah. I move to approve the bus routes for the 2019-2020 school year as presented.
Okay, moved and seconded. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries, Ms. Westberg. Okay. Next up is item C, the boundary review service bid.
So if you guys recall, last spring we passed a resolution in which we decided we were going to look at some pretty significant things moving forward. One of those was the concept of rezoning our school district as we come online with this new elementary school. If you recall, there were other things like some equity conversations between the high schools and late start, and just a comprehensive overview. Well, the first, maybe most, probably the most urgent of those, I would argue, that we've got to get done is we would like to discuss with you today is the process to start the reboundering for our schools. We went out and serviced, got 6 different firms providing us bids for this process, and Jeff is going to present to you our recommendations today for a firm we'd like your approval on to consider for this next process, so that when school starts next fall, not this fall, but next fall, that we would have a plan in place for how the boundaries would look for all 17 of our schools. So, Jeff, if you wouldn't mind, I'd like to turn this over to you.
All right. Good evening, Chairman Morris Rowe, Superintendent Cook, members of the board. It's my pleasure to stand up here this evening and make our recommendation for the boundary review services firm that we would recommend that you guys approve. So as Dr. Cook mentioned, we received 6 proposals. We were thrilled to receive, to have so much interest in this project that we were going to partake on. And so I've listed the firms up here just so you can see some of the diversity of the firms that did submit proposals to us. Cooperative Strategies out of Lakewood, Colorado, Decision Insight out of Irvine, California, Flow Analytics out of Portland, Oregon, JUB Engineering in partnership with several different firms here locally, MGT Consulting Group, Tampa, Florida, and Teeter and Crocker, Hayden, Idaho, Seattle, Washington. As we went through, we had a team of 6 members of our administrative team that reviewed these proposals. It was our intent in the way that this RFP was written to look for, to be very clear that we were looking for a bunch of different factors that we wanted to consider in this. So we had an evaluation scoring tool that we went through, and that included a cover letter, which we gave 5 points or 5% to, the company profile that they presented to us worth 5, qualifications of the firm and the team members of their firm worth 15%, experience on other projects, especially related to school district rezoning, 10%, management approach and methodology for the project, 20%, available tools and current workload, 10%, project understanding and clarity of our project and clarity in their proposal, 10%, location of the firm, 5%, and cost of services as outlined in their proposal, 20%. So as you can see, we had a wide variety of different things that we were looking at as we went through and scored the different firms. Our scoring team included Dr. Cook, Dr. Cottle, Dr. Roscoe, Seth Deniston, Jay Prickett, and myself. As we went through and scored, it became pretty evident as we went through that there was one firm that we wanted to recommend to you. And that firm was Flow Analytics out of Portland, Oregon. They're a DBA of Mal, Foster, and Alongi. They actually have a firm based in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. So it's over in the Parkside Towers. And so one of the things they proposed to us is that they would have some office space if they came over here for a couple of days to do some work out of as well. The base price for that firm, for the base price of their proposal was $90,838. They gave us an option of $19,780, and that option was for community surveys, and that would be provided by Critical Data Strategies, LLC, which is actually a Spokane-based firm, and that would be to initiate surveys. And we asked them, why a separate entity to do the surveys? And they said their response to us was that, well, this is a firm that they trust. They've used them on a bunch of different projects in the past, including the work that they did for Central Valley. And this is a firm that really understands how to do surveys, really understands the details and the intricacies of that, and they really trust and believe in that. So with the total of the base price and the options, it would be $110,618. So why Flow Analytics? One, they did come out as our highest rated scorer. They weren't the first choice for everybody on our team, but they were generally at the top, within the top 2, but definitely stood above the other firms and became the highest rated firm that we looked at. They were strong with GIS mapping. They presented quality tools to present the data to our stakeholders, to our school board, and to our administration team. We felt like they presented the most complete and comprehensive plan to meet all of the needs that we outlined in the RFP. They're regionally located with easy access to Coeur d'Alene. They had strong references, notably just recently completed work with Central Valley School District, and actually are still working with Central Valley School District as they look at the high school boundary rezoning for Central Valley. They provided consideration for socioeconomic and demographic balance. They presented a complete enrollment projection package to us as really a strong consideration for one of the real key components that we need to look at in this process. They presented the strongest plan for consideration of future building sites, siting analysis, and consideration of existing land assets. And one of the things that set them apart was hosting all public meetings in person. Several firms would host them all in person. Several of them had proposed doing some via video, Skype type meetings as well. But that was one of the things that set this firm apart to us from that. As we reviewed all of the different firms, we felt like some firms were really strong in GIS, some were really strong in enrollment projections. I kind of felt like they had specialties that they would be really strong in, but we really felt like, and based on scores, we could see that Flow Analytics presented the most complete package to us. So that is our recommendation, is that the board would consider approving Flow Analytics to take on this project for us. To complete our process. And additionally, I think it would provide some strong support that the Long Range Planning Committee would like to see, including future building site considerations, siting analysis for future schools, and consideration of existing assets that the district has. Further, the administration and our review team would recommend that the board approve the option for the community surveys, and that would be at the total cost presented of $110,618. And that was an estimate that they gave us in their presentation of 585 man hours that they would be allocating to this project. I think one of the things you guys are aware of is source of funds. How would we fund this? And I want to spend a little bit of time talking about that. So this was not included in the 2019-2020 fiscal year budget. And so we would recommend using fund balance to support this project. And we've talked a little bit about a team. Can we do that? Can we do that? And I'd like to actually ask Katie Ebner to come up and just kind of speak on behalf of that as well from the finance side of things.
So I know that the board has put in a lot of work to balancing our general fund budget. It was noted as a priority for a number of years. And so just to keep in mind when we're talking about taking an expenditure out of fund balance, the best practice would be that it's a one-time expenditure, not something, this is certainly not ongoing, it's something needed. And the other piece of information to consider is one of the most influential reasons that we put such an effort into ending deficit spending was noted in our bond rating that that's what they would like to see our district stop doing because we had been deficit spending for a number of years. We've stabilized our budget, and I think that is something that will be easy for an outside entity to note when they're looking at our finances, that after a number of years of spending into fund balance, we were able to stop that trend, stabilize our budget, and now this is something planned and needed for our district. So that's just some information to consider. I wish I could come up here and say, it's fine, we'll, find the money somewhere. Like, I just want you all to know going into it that this is a possibility that it would come from fund balance, but I'm feeling comfortable with that fact.
What would it leave our fund balance at? You don't have those numbers yet, right? Because I don't have a problem with fund balance if it doesn't put us into a deficit mode again.
Well, so that would be a deficit in the fact that what we brought in would be less than what we expended for the year because we built a balanced budget, and so this would be an unbudgeted expenditure that, if everything goes as planned as far as our budget, and we add this as an expenditure, that would put the budget in a deficit. However, it's not an ongoing deficit, so that's the big red flag, is if you are adding in an ongoing cost and that puts your budget into a deficit, you're looking at trouble. But this is a one-time expenditure for something that hopefully we won't have to repeat for many years. So.
Katie, do you have a specific fund in mind that you might transfer from? I know we've used forestry funds when they were general fund.
General fund you're recommending.
General fund, yeah, right.
But aren't there additional funds that we have used in the past, like the forestry?
Well, the
fund?
forestry funds we don't carry a balance in the forestry funds anymore. We just, whatever revenues come in, we transfer into the general fund. There could be, as the year develops, there could be opportunities to find money. For example, School Plus is one that always comes up in these conversations. However, knowing that we've changed now to more full day K programs, it's possible that, we may not be running as much profit through that fund as we're used to. And so, we may identify another need later on. So I think going into it without having all the pieces to the puzzle, it is, a good idea to just understand that this could put the general fund into a scenario where the fund balance is decreasing from FY20 to FY21.
Jeff, I had a quick question for you. And you actually, when you're talking about the work they've done for Central Valley, and you mentioned that they're coming back to do work on their high school attendance zone. And as I was reading through, I guess I hadn't thought about it, but are we focusing on K-5 attendance zoning, or are we doing attendance zoning for secondary also?
Yeah, we are doing primary and secondary with
Perfect.
this
That's what I
one.
was gonna say.
We talked about that as an option, and does this fit within the time frame that we have available to do all that we want to do, or would it be recommended best practice to, look at elementary, then look at middle school, then look at high school, such as Central Valley has done, but felt like it would fit, for a district our size, it would fit within the time frame that we have available to present this to you, and would work and flow within this process as well. So, and with that, you guys had their proposal in your board packets, and I'd stand for any additional questions you have with it.
Thank you for providing it early.
You're welcome.
And just to refresh our memory, about 2 weeks ago, 10 days ago, we met. We had a special meeting where we didn't talk about the specific proposals, but we just talked about the concept in general and kind of what the purpose of this work is for. And, I think we all agreed at that point that this is important work. If you look at our boundaries, really, of all 16 schools, there's some adjustments needed to all of them. And for those of us who went through a few minor tweaks a couple years ago, it's a painful process. And to do 16 of them, or 16, I guess, because Venture doesn't have one, right? So it's going to take some additional support to do that. And I think, it's important. Could we do this locally? Could we do this with our own folks? I think you could make that argument. But it's difficult, having gone through it before. It's very easy for there to be haves and have-nots based on who's represented in that committee. So I like that this is really a data-driven approach to attendance zoning. Our curriculum audit talked about equity and the lack of in some situations. So I think by using data as opposed to emotion, which is how we've formed attendance zones before, I think it will really help out with the balance of our schools. So
I don't have a problem with it myself. I mean, I was involved in that previous rezoning, and it was painful, and it was political, and it had a lot to do with who showed up at the meeting, how loud their voices were. It wasn't based on objective data, from what I could tell, and so if this makes it more objective, takes it out of our hands for a while, I'm fine with it. The cost, as I expressed earlier, just concerns me, but if it's not an ongoing deficit, and I trust Katie that we're end up at the end of the year in good shape. You always manage to pull it out, pull us out of the fire every year you've done it, so I'm trusting you'll do it again. So anyway, I'm in favor of it. Thank you.
Jeff, I'd just like to highlight, I think the flow seems as though the community involvement is a huge piece in what they're doing, and I think that will be helpful in this process. I think Casey mentioned that it's going to be a mindset change, and so I think having them there every step of the way, and I'm excited to see that they'll be involved in many of the community conversations, and hosting those and facilitating those will make it easier for our community to understand.
I agree as well. I think it's a awesome opportunity that we have, and I love that we're also going to be looking at future building site and consideration and all the considerations of our existing assets, all the stuff that we've really tried to stay on top of. I know in the last 4 years of being ahead of needing land and what we're going to need in the future, instead of like, oh my gosh, we're in this land search right now with no land out there. And so I think that's going to be awesome and helpful as well, and support for our long range planning committee that spends a lot of time. It's going to be helpful for them as well. So thank you for the time that you guys put into this and listening to us as we shared our concerns. And it looks like you guys nailed all of them.
And my comments would just restate everything my 4 colleagues have, but thank you again, Jeff and Dr. Cook, and whoever's underneath doing all that work, because I think this will be a great thing for our district.
Thank you.
Yeah, any further questions, comments? Okay.
I move to authorize to engage with Flow Analytics to complete the boundary review services process for the Coeur d'Alene School District, and to authorize the base price and option for a community survey for an estimated total of $110,618.
I'll second it.
Okay, it's been motioned and seconded. Any discussion on the motion? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries, Ms. Westberg.
So when can we expect to see him in town?
Well, I'm sure we will start conversations with them very quickly. They are ready to go, and are excited to take this on.
Okay, next up is item D, the preschool facility. I'm going to turn that over to Dr. Cook. Just before I do, I'm going to just remind you guys, I'm going to recuse myself from this discussion and any potential vote, just because of my involvement with the church, who's the tenant, or the landlord in this case, and that our family attends there. So, Ms. May, I'll just ask you to handle this item, and then I'll take it back over when we're done.
So I'm going to ask Jeff to stay up, and I'm going to ask Dr. Orozco to also join him at the podium. Just a quick background on this situation. We were approached about the opportunity of renting a space that they have available as a potential site. We saw a very quick, useful site, use for the site at the Lutheran Church of the Master. On the corner of Kathleen and Ramsey, they've got a gathering site that currently is being used by the Lamb School that is vacated for the upcoming year. And this opportunity to use that as a site for potentially an early childhood education center and move some of our developmental preschool and Kinder Plus. I'm going to let these guys go into greater detail for it. We took advantage of the opportunity to go look over that site and talk through whether or not that might actually serve as a useful purpose, and especially as hard-pressed as we are for space, and what access that might free up in some of our schools also. So I'm going to turn this over to Jeff and Dr. Roscoe to kind of walk you through how we got to this position and why we're going to recommend to you today that we'd like to enter in as a renter and a tenant agreement with the church as serving as landlord. So at this time, I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Roscoe and Jeff Fuller.
Good evening, trustees. I think maybe what I'll do is talk about the kind of conditions, the learning conditions that existed prior to this possibility, and then let Jeff talk about the kind of the discovery part of that, and then maybe I can come back in about what it might mean for educational programs there. But I think we're all aware of and we'll talk some more when we talk about enrollment, but we're all aware of the critical space issues that we're having in our elementary schools. And currently we have two developmental preschools in Bora, 2 developmental preschool classrooms at Atlas that were added last year. And there was a lot of negotiation going on about where we might put yet another couple developmental preschool classrooms, because that population of children has sort of exploded, as Jenny Gilmore, who runs that program, will tell us. And please understand that all of our principals in our elementary communities welcome these little babies with open arms. It really is just a matter of space. And when we're over in classroom sizes and we're working on that, just finding room is a difficult challenge. I'll let Jeff take it from there, and then I'll come back in and maybe talk about what we think it'll mean for our kids.
So I heard the term space a couple of times from Dr. Cook and Dr. Roscoe, and I think I will reiterate that space is an issue in our district. And as the last school year was wrapping up, I got called into a meeting to say, at board, to say we are out of space, and I don't know how we're going to continue to host the preschool. And so we actually went on a quest to try to figure out, where can we create space for, additional classrooms for the preschool in the district. And this opportunity came up, and we started looking at it to say, okay, would this work for us? And is this something that that we could really take a serious look at? And we went and looked at the facility. There's 5 classrooms, there's an office, there's a stage, there's a gym, bathroom facilities. And so it's something that would work for this program, that we could move all of the developmental preschool in there. From the logistical side of it, it would be a dream to have all of the developmental preschools in one location. As Jill and I were talking about the impact of transportation on that, she did a happy dance at her desk, and I told her we were video conferencing. Oh, she's still here, and I said, I'm going to videotape you, and I'm going to show that video at the board meeting tonight. To be able to just understand that, because we've been providing transportation for all these different programs to several different location sites, and to have all that go to one location would be, a big deal for us from the logistical standpoint of it. So we bring this before you. The lease agreement we put in your board packet, so you guys can see the details of the lease as this was outlined. We've been negotiating this for some time, and have kept it quiet just for the nature of what was going on with the church, as well as our process of considering this without bringing a lot of attention to what we're doing, until we could know that this was a path forward that we could bring to you guys in confidence. Some of the details in there is, again, we're looking at something that is a cost to the district, and so there's always a question of, okay, how are we going to cover this? A couple things I do want to point out with this is currently we are leasing a space at the Church of the Nazarene. We have 3 small classrooms that we're hosting Kinder Plus. So that's the School Plus option for half-day kindergarten students. And so we have a morning session and an afternoon session, and at $1,500 a month. So we would be able to we would not renew that lease with the Church of the Nazarene and apply that funding towards this. This one would be $6,000 a month, and we're currently paying $1,500 a month for the 3 small classrooms. And so we would actually merge those 2 programs. So Kinder Plus would be at this location as well. And so we would be able to house both the developmental preschool and Kinder Plus at this location. Space, convenience, there's a lot of pluses to being able to do this. So how would we fund it? So partly we would take the $1,500 a month that we're currently spending for Kinder Plus, but we would also recommend that we use the fund balance from School Plus. Currently they generally run around $300,000 in profit each year, and this would run so $72,000 at it'd be $72,000 if we run $6,000 for 12 months. Take out what we pay to the Church of the Nazarene, so less $13,500. So we're looking at $58,500 that we would pull out of fund balance from School Plus to cover this for the district. So that's kind of how we'd be looking at funding this. I think I'm going to pass it back over to Kate, just kind of to talk about a little more of the benefits from the program side of it for the preschools.
I think primarily, if we look at the schools that are not this space, so Bora and Atlas, Skyway, where we thought we were going to need to add an additional preschool classroom in Harding Center. What it obviously means for those schools is that they have some breathing room, and that's tremendous for them, just in terms of and when we see enrollment numbers, I think it'll become crystal clear why we just need to know that there's a classroom out there someplace for our babies as they come to us. At the center itself, if this were our early childhood center, it would be tremendous to have all of our preschool little ones in one space. I don't imagine immediately we would generate some efficiencies, but certainly down the road, when you think about occupational therapists and speech and language therapists not having to travel across the country to serve our kids, but to be in one place, that means we can get a lot smarter about how we serve our kids and how we divide up those hours and that responsibility. In addition to that, there would be classroom space now for Jenny Gilmore and her team, not classroom space, office space for Jenny Gilmore and her team to be right there at the center with the little ones, as opposed to Harding and then having to travel. So immediate consultation is available then for our teachers in those classrooms, which means kids will get a much more responsive program. And I think that's tremendous. And honestly, the idea of having all of our little developmental preschool children in one spot has spurred a lot of conversation about, what if? What if we had an early childhood class for high schoolers to explore and have, let them have a chance to see what that might be like to spend time in classrooms with our littlest learners. And we imagine that might offer some insights for our high school kids or whomever, but offer some insights about what might be possible in terms of career opportunities and teaching, hypothetically, right? So lots of ideas we've just generated lots of ideas about what might be possible if we had our little ones there in that space together. I catch everything.
I think so. Are we paying for our space at Harding?
No, we do not pay for the space at Harding. NIC provides that for us.
So my other question is more program-wise. How would this change our relationship with Head Start or Early Head Start? Because I know they're located at Harding, and we've had a good relationship with them. With this, can you comment on that?
I can comment, and then Frank can correct me if I'm wrong. So Jenny and her team would still offer consultation to our Head Start classrooms. So they'd be traveling there to Harding to offer that consultation. And my guess is Harding would probably love that additional extra space in their facility as well. I don't know, that's a very vibrant community there at Harding, but it's also very cozy. So I think having a little breathing room there would also help. But that won't change our relationship, our consulting relationship with the Head Start program.
Any further questions? I had just a quick question. Katie might be able to help with this. So we get reimbursed for our preschool students from the state. Is that correct, or is it a...
We earn support units based on preschool students.
So in theory, would the program pay for itself? I know we're talking about, taking more money out of fund balance, but in theory, wouldn't it partially pay for itself?
Well, it would just depend on whether or not we had more enrollment, because the students that are currently in our district are part of our revenues. So if we had more enrollment, we would earn more support units on those students.
Okay.
Yeah.
I guess the next question is about using the fund balance and talking about our School Plus, longevity of that fund. I know we haven't quite determined with increased kindergarten what that balance will look like, and Jeff gave us some numbers. But
sorry.
I'm just curious if there's certainty that we'll have enough in this fund to use it as a source.
Well, and just a point of clarification on that, the funding source would be the annual profit from School Plus. And so this year, the program ran, I have the numbers up right here. Let me grab them. This year, if you're not taking the transfers out of School Plus into consideration, the program ran in the black by, I thought I had that up, by $340,000, which was higher than previous years, so that's good news. And so that is when we started the year with a fund balance in School Plus of $621,000. We added to it by the $340,000, but then we transferred out $668,000. That would leave us with about an estimated around $300,000 left over. However, we're not looking at, because this is an ongoing expense, we definitely we don't want to say it's coming from fund balance. We're saying it's coming from the net income that the program is generating of about $340,000. And so what I said in the last presentation was, with the changes to full day K, we want to kind of not commit so much of that net income or profit from the program, but I felt that this was a reasonable amount to commit from that net income, especially because it benefits School Plus. But beyond that, I think it's a good idea to kind of hold back and see what happens.
Yeah, so I think my question would be, next year, is this something that we could build into our budget and not?
I think if we want, we would need to reserve new revenues in order to commit that. However, it's just a matter of, if School Plus can support it, yeah.
Good. I think it's important also to note that because putting it in the budget so that it was being funded by the general fund, first of all, there's not a way right now currently that we can expand services because we don't have the space. This potentially we could expand services. We could also expand Kinder Plus, arguably, with additional space that we would be able to access. So there would be the opportunity to possibly generate more revenue where there's absolutely not the current possibility right now, because there's just, in fact, one of the decisions we were talking about before this came to light was looking at potentially decreasing the amount of programming that we were going to be providing for developmental preschool students. At that age, you want to do not just what you're legally bound to do. You want to provide a program that is viable and works great for the kids. And so, is it a moneymaker for us? I don't think it's going to be a moneymaker, but it's definitely more opportunity for utilizing that space more efficiently than we currently have right now.
I think it's a great idea, and I think it's exciting. I want to see what School Plus does this year as we further expand all-day kindergarten. And I think in the coming years, we will continue to expand all-day kindergarten. So it will be curious or interesting to see what the revenues are from School Plus. So I think, we've got some time. I think it's a potential expansion, but it still makes me a little bit nervous.
I think what Dr. Cook said made me realize that something that hasn't been said yet, and we can probably bring some data to the conversation, not right now, but we know that there's a savings when we're able to reach little ones at preschool age who have developmental challenges, and we're able to address those. There's tremendous savings down the road in terms of special education services. So all that we can do to get them ready for kindergarten is a huge investment that I think pays dividends, and I think we could probably share that with you in some board notes, what that would be.
And another thing that I think is meaningful to at least project out there is the fact that this is the first run at essentially what we would call an early childhood center, and how we might be able to expand services by having them consolidated in one location. What opportunities exist that don't currently exist because they're spread over several different locations, and what efficiencies will we get, not just financially, not just for reduced travel expense, but for the opportunities that we would have all the kids that we could serve in a centralized location. That to me is worth the additional cost on its own, just because all of the investment that we can put into kids at this age could reduce costs further down the road for them as well. And so it's in my opinion, a very low investment in finances to get what is potentially a very high return in programming value and add for students' programming in that program.
Any further questions? Motion?
I don't have a problem with it. I think it's a great idea, and I think putting the programs together, for all the reasons you talked about. My question is only, and I guess I could probably read the contract a little bit closer, but are we going to, there's going to be adequate security in that facility?
Yeah, we actually took some of our security team over to look at that as well. It does have a double entry, so vestibule entry, and so yeah, we feel like it's pretty well set up for security.
Cameras and the security and all the stuff we normally would have.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you. I'll make the motion on this, which I gotta go back and find out what that was. The motion was to approve the lease agreement as presented.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further comment? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Mine was an aye, by the way. All right. It's been moved and seconded and passed.
You got it all. Thank you, Miss May,
Thank you.
for handling that for me.
Thank you.
Okay, we are moving on. And next up, item E is a number of math items. And what a way to introduce Katie Grotmann to us, to just throw her up here on the front lines. And now she gets to present at her first board meeting.
So I'm very pleased to introduce to you our new Director of Curriculum, Katie Grotmann, and we're here to talk with you about two programs, Honors 2 Math. She's going to have some updates for you regarding the submission that we have to CMSI and give you some new detail on that. I will say to you, unfortunately, I do believe that we were overpromised. We're hanging in there with them. The data we've gotten from them so far, the preliminary stuff, has been very useful, but we're still being strung out a little bit. They're not quite ready. We don't have a final date proposed by them yet. We keep reaching out. They said it's coming. It is coming. She's going to present on that a little bit. But we would ask for you to consider giving us some guidance and recommendation. We're going to give you some recommendations on what we'd like to do with Honors Math 2 to get us started into the year, and K-5 ready classroom for math at the elementary level. So yeah, I'd like to introduce Katie Grotmann for that conversation.
Thank you so much. Chairman Morris-Rowe and Superintendent Cook and board trustees. So in regards to the integrated math audit update, I spoke by phone with Brian Ellis, who is the lead auditor for the integrated math 1, 2, and 3 curriculum. At that time on July 10th, he estimated that the audit would not be available until the week of July 29th. As we got closer to July 29th, I reached out again, and he replied that we would hopefully be able to see a draft today. I don't have that draft yet. So we do not yet have the information that we need to do the full revisions for the course. We looked at that. We saw that there are some steps that need to be taken just based on that. And we started outlining what those steps might be. For example, we need to look at reviews of exemplars. We need to create a teacher committee to review and write curriculum. We will need to look at things like adding in prerequisites and aligning learning targets with our standards, and just generally creating a cycle of continuous improvement. But it was a really great meeting in that it helped inform some of the changes that we wanted to make to the Honors Integrated Math 2 course pacing guide. And so that was a really exciting opportunity to say, how do we want to differentiate Honors Math, Integrated Math 2 from Integrated Math 2? And so we looked at 3 primary areas for differentiation. We looked at accelerated learning. In some places, we recognize students don't need to spend as much time on the learning because they're able to adapt more quickly. So in some cases, for example, in Unit 1, units were reduced in time from 3 to 2 weeks. In other units, we looked at deeper learning. So whereas students in the Integrated Math 2 might be expected to understand something at an introductory level, we now identified that we would like students to master something at a developmental level. So that is another way that we were able to differentiate. And a third way where we were able to differentiate was by adding in additional learning. In some units, because we had done some course compacting and some time compacting, we were able to add in additional learning for students. For example, in Unit 4, probability, students will be spending additional weeks to calculate probabilities of compound events. So those were some different ways that we were able to look at the Honors Integrated Math 2 course pacing guide to ensure that students were receiving a more honors curriculum and approach into their learning. So today we will ask that you provisionally accept the course pacing guide for Honors Integrated Math 2. For the K-5 math course pacing guides, which are also in your packet, when the board approved Ready Math for kindergarten through 8th grade in the spring of 2015, we knew that we would be receiving a new edition as soon as it was available. And so that happened this year. Ready Math became Ready Classroom. And when that happened, we knew that we needed to adapt our course pacing guides to more accurately reflect the materials that students had available to them. So they were rewritten by our content teams and with some additional notes from Abe Wallin, who is the Idaho Regional Math Center coach, to reflect some of those changes. And so you'll have those, you also have those in your board packet today. What questions can I answer?
Questions? I just want to make sure I'm understanding. So provisional approval on Honors Math because or Honors Math 2, because we're waiting additional information from the curriculum audit folks. K-5 Ready Math is provisional or
K-5
not?
Ready Math, I believe we're just asking for acceptance.
Okay. So I'm going to separate those out once we get to those. I have a question just on Honors Math 2 in regards to plus standards. And this just comes from I was the board liaison for the integrated math work we did this year. And so there are plus targets or plus standards, I guess, through the state that aren't required in a math course, but they can be added. And so were those something also that were added into those course pacing guides, do you know? Or when you talk about kind of a deeper understanding?
I know that those were considered and discussed as part of the course pacing guide. I'm not certain if all of them have been included in this draft. That's something that I could get back to you on. I do know that those were part of the discussions in the pacing guides.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions on this? Okay, so I'm going to separate them out. We'll do Honors Math 2 first. So is there a motion to provisionally approve Honors Math 2? Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any discussion on that motion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Nay. Ms. May was a nay. Okay, is there a motion to approve K-5 Ready Classroom as presented?
So moved. Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion also carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next up, policy for action. This was a policy we saw last month, and it was out for public comment. We did have one public comment, and as you saw in the notes there, and then saw in the policy with the blue lines, they did make some changes there and kind of further define. So there were some blurred lines, I think was the concern there. So looks like Seth's up at the podium. This policy fell under him. So any questions for Seth? Okay, I'm hearing none. Seth, thank you for putting that out there and working on it and making those revisions.
I guess I still don't even understand what the technology I'm trying to figure automatically listen in technology. It kind of sounds like Big Brother to me. It kind of frightens
It definitely does fall in that category. So Angel Sense is one example. So if you want to Google that later, you'll be able to see what it's all about. But basically, it's a small device that can fit in a pocket, or it can even be sewn into clothes. And the difference between that and a cell phone is that it automatically listens in. So the parent has an app on their phone, they can press a button and listen in. This policy just kind of helps clean that up a little bit, so that if we do have parents wanting to use that with, say, some of our special needs students, we have a policy in place and some procedures will be developed to follow for those.
Has that been happening? Has it happened? I don't know. I guess I don't want to spend a lot of time on this. It just bothers me, frankly, that people be embedding secret listening devices on their kid and listening to what's going on in school or in their. I just think that's weird.
I think the helpful piece is if it's a student that elopes, like runs off of campus. That's usually the main reason that Angel Sense promotes, at least, and so. Frank Meyer and I felt like it was important enough to get ahead of and accept this ISBA policy with the revisions you see.
You can certainly see an appropriate use of it, and you can definitely see an inappropriate use, right? Which is why you have the policy and why you brought it forward. And I imagine as technology continues to evolve, if that's the right word, we'll see more and more of these specific policies dealing with these unique technology devices. I guess I'll put it that way.
Come up with a policy about brain implants or something one of these days. Things are going. Anyway,
Okay, so is there a motion to approve the policy as presented with the blue lines?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. There was none opposed. Okay, we're on page 2, and we are into information items.
I just want to note that we are exactly on time. So, Lynn, if you're watching, you'd be proud of us. So I want to take this opportunity to introduce Seth. He's going to do our annual technology report, and I think there's good information in this, and it's not sewn into your pants, so nobody won't.
Well, thank you, Board Chair Morstro, Superintendent Cook, members of the board. Thank you for giving me this opportunity, and also thank you for letting me go before Jeff Bankston. Just wanted to give you our annual technology update. Just as a reminder, technology in our district actually encompasses 3 departments now. So security, informational technology, and instructional technology. And you can see our org chart here. There's a couple of these positions that have been added recently, thanks to the generosity of our voters via the levy. So the campus safety officers there at the bottom were hired this summer. We also added a security technician as well. So all those 5 positions have been hired, and the campus safety officers will start here in the next month or so. Under informational technology, not a lot has changed. We've just kind of reorganized ourselves to make it more streamlined. This security technician role kind of sits on both the technology and the security side, because there is so much overlap when it comes to security equipment. Much of that is plugged into our network. All of it, kind of touches both sides of our department. So, when we talk about staffing, wanted to just give you this update on staffing over time, so you can see it's held pretty stable over time. The big growth area, of course, has been in security over the last few years, again, thanks to the levy. But we've also added a building technician. We added half of an instructional technology coach. So we're finally getting to the point where I feel like we're fully staffed, and I feel comfortable taking on the load that we have and being able to be proactive. Until now, it's been super reactive. We're doing a lot of putting out fires, but now, we're able to work ahead on some projects. We're able to get out there and replace some things before they break, which is a good place to be for sure. This kind of goes along with that. So some of you might recall that we use a ticketing system for a lot of our IT and security issues. This just shows the growth of demand for our services over time. So this is the number of closed tickets by year. This last year, we went over 9,000 closed tickets. So we're keeping our staff busy for sure. But again, it's great to be able to respond to our staff in a timely manner. I think, when we look at different measures of our success, certainly our staff feedback is part of that. Normally, I would include the survey data as part of this presentation, but I'm trying to move that away from a June survey into more like an October survey. So I'll have that data later this year. This is just an overview of technology by the numbers in the district. I provide this just to give you an idea of the scope of what we do in our district from a technology standpoint. I've used this comparison before, but the largest company in the state is around 12,000 users. We have 13,000 if you include all of our staff and students. So we have a very complex network. We have a lot of demands as far as the number of systems and programs that we're using. Everything that curriculum is adopting usually has some sort of online component, and all that kind of flows through technology. So you can see, whether it's the number of Chromebooks to the number of wireless access points, all that stuff it needs to be maintained and kept up. And so I just wanted you to get an idea of the scope of it. Also wanted to point out under security, those over 1,000 security cameras, that was all purchased via 2013 bond. And so we've kind of been replacing those one or two at a time. That's something that we'll need to figure out in the near future. Additionally, Dean Keck, our safety and security coordinator, wanted me to just give an update that we have 19 communication systems out there. So that's been something he's been working on a lot, is radios, getting all of our schools outfitted with radios if they didn't have them, or programming them properly if they didn't already have that. So that's been something that we've been working on over the past year or so.
Seth, can I interrupt you on that slide real quick? In the past, we've talked about ratios, right? Devices to students and devices to staff. And that's usually when we get all sorts of comments on our Facebook feed. So can you just talk about that a little bit? Because we have more devices than we have people, but and users, but we're not one-to-one, so to speak, in certain buildings, and just kind of why that is, just so we have that explanation.
Yeah, so this gets a little bit complicated, and it can be a little bit misleading. I think that's kind of what you're referring to. So when we talk about the student-to-device ratio, we're actually have more devices than students now. But when you look at that from a district-wide perspective, it's not always the clearest picture, I guess I'd say. Our focus this year has been getting Chromebooks at the elementary schools. So I think I talked a little bit about that back in May when I asked for approval on a Chromebook purchase. What we did was try to get a Chromebook cart in every elementary classroom this summer. So I feel more confident saying that we're one-to-one. There certainly is always going to be pockets where, we're not exactly there. And so one example I'd give is ALP at the elementary schools. Those students are coming out of a general ed classroom and going to an ALP classroom. We might not have a cart of devices in that ALP classroom, but those students could be bringing their devices from their general classroom into the ALP classroom. So you'll still have a couple of spots where that's the case, but by and large, I think we'll have a Chromebook cart in basically every classroom this fall.
will we ever get to the point where we're assigning a device to a student? And
Yes.
where the device moves with the student, as
Yes.
opposed to now we may have
Right.
a cart of devices sitting there not being used during a certain
Yeah.
period because of preps and those sorts of things.
So definitely at the secondary level, that makes a lot of sense because you have students that move throughout the day from class to class. And it's not the most efficient to put a Chromebook cart in every classroom at the secondary level. So this year our plan is to pilot that at several classrooms or grade levels and then see how that works and roll it out. We've kind of quietly been testing, checking devices out to students at the high schools, just kind of on an as needed basis. And so we've worked out a few things, but I'd like to work out a few more things before we roll that out to all 6 secondary schools. I'm going to skip back to budget here because I wanted to give you kind of a high-level view of our technology and security budgets. So when we talk about technology, Katie kind of alluded to this earlier. Technology is one of the few departments that has several different revenue streams coming in. And so you can see on this pie chart here where that money is coming from. One of the largest chunks is state classroom technology funding, so that comes in as a line item from the state. There's also a pretty large chunk that comes from state discretionary funding, and so part of that is funding specifically for IT staffing that's meant to make up the difference between a typical classified staff and what an IT staff would cost. We also get about 10% of our technology budget from the E-rate program. So that's a reimbursement program. We do have to spend some money and then apply to get reimbursed for that. So that's dependent on expenses. And then the last is about 10% comes from the levy as well. So we kind of get funding for technology from a variety of sources. As far as budgeted expenses, you can see that a large portion of that goes to equipment and devices. So about 1.4 million goes to devices, which would be like Chromebooks, iPads, laptops, desktops, even things like network switches and firewalls, anything that's hardware. The next largest chunk is about 40% goes towards IT staffing. So this is just the IT staffing, not the security staffing. And then the remainder goes to licensing and contracts or professional development and stipends. And then looking at the security budget, this is one thing that I really wanted to highlight to all of you and to our community. Our security budget has had about a 40% increase since 2017, 2018. The bulk of that has come through the levy that voters approved in March. And so the SRO contract, of course, we added an elementary SRO this year. Staffing, we added those 4 campus safety officers to the 2 comprehensive high schools, as well as that security technician. And then even in the equipment and licensing, when security came over to technology a few years ago, that budget was only $50,000, which it's really hard to do anything when you talk about having over 1,000 cameras in the district. Replacing anything more than just what gets broken with only 50,000 is really complicated. So that 120,000 is definitely helpful for proactively getting after some of those things. This just shows budget amounts over time. This doesn't include staffing, but you can see a couple things on here. One, you've got that kind of teal line going straight up. That's the 2013 bond. So there was a lot of money earmarked for technology projects in that. Some of those things we've added to our annual replacement cycles, and so we've kind of spread it out over a number of years. There are other expenses that we're going to have to figure out how we're replacing them. I mentioned cameras already a couple times. We've kind of just been replacing those as we can. You'll also see that classroom technology funding from the state, that's one that's really increased over time, but then has kind of flattened out the last year or so. And then this is specifically a deep dive into the technology licensing and contracts. I wanted to call this out because I wanted to show the number of those licenses and contracts that are instructional technology. So this is things that students are using in the classroom, things like keyboarding without tears, which to me has one of the greatest titles ever. Also, we have things like Explain Everything, Video. There's an app called Cami. These are all things that are meant for students and teachers to use in the classroom. The other area here that's grown a lot over the years is cybersecurity. You'll see that that's about 20% of this budget. That's something that we've really focused on as a department. We've spent a lot of time getting trained and talking about some of the different things we're doing when it comes to cybersecurity. And so I have a diagram in your packet that kind of goes through some of the different cybersecurity controls we have in place. There's a few of these that we've added over time. So like just this summer, we updated our Cisco firewall. So that's the first point of traffic coming in from the internet, and then it's the last point for traffic going out of our network to the internet. And so there's a lot of controls now that we have added there recently. Some really cool stuff we can do with like geolocation, so not allowing users to log on outside of the United States or stuff like that. So we're really still kind of working on refining some of that, but that's a really big part of our cybersecurity plan. Any good cybersecurity plan involves a lot of layers, and so you can see as you kind of go down to the desktop layer there, we've got an antivirus software on all of our user computers. We've got malware bites. We try to do a lot of training around phishing. I think I've mentioned to you before that our end users are probably our biggest vulnerability. And so something like 80% of cyber attacks comes from the user doing something, whether that's clicking on a link or opening an email they shouldn't. So we have a lot of email controls that we've been slowly turning on over time. We're probably going to start kind of testing our users a little bit more this fall, where we're actually intentionally sending phishing emails to them, seeing what they do. So all the more reason to be all the more careful when you're reading your emails and clicking on things. The other thing that we added here this summer, and thank you for approving this back in May, we added an event and incident management software called Rapid7. We just turned that on in July, and we're really excited about it. It takes from all these different systems and brings it into one dashboard, so we can see, like, if there's an issue on the wireless network and then the same person has an issue on a desktop, we can triangulate that a little bit easier. And so it just gives us a lot more visibility when we might have a problem. It also helps us kind of track something down. So this summer, immediately after we turned it on, we had a principal, not Jeff, someone else, that logged into their account from 3 different countries in Europe. And so immediately we knew we had a problem. We turned that account off and called the principal and reset their password. So it just gives us a lot of visibility. It's actually a really cool piece of software. A lot of summer projects. I think I sent you the spreadsheet. We had about 40 major projects going on this summer, many of which are completed at this point in the year. From software solutions, we're working on a new software for special ed. We've got a lot of devices that have come into the district, many of which you approved. A lot of different infrastructure projects, whether that's replacing switches or the firewall I mentioned. We brought in a new disaster recovery server, so that gives us the ability to start everything up for the district from a remote site, which is helpful in case of an emergency. And then from a security perspective, a lot of different projects going on. Our new security technician, John Pillmore, really hit the ground running. I think day 1 or 2, they already had him out pulling some cable and doing some different things. So we've been working on lockdown integration, which ties our phone system in with our door system. We also have started adding some blue emergency strobes. So in locations where you can't hear very well, there'll be strobe lights that go off like during a lockdown. That's a project that's ongoing. We also have added some safety film to several entrances. So that goes over existing windows, and then there's a frame that goes along it as well. That makes it so you can't break out the window. You could shatter the glass, but you can't penetrate that without a lot of effort. In some cases, it can take up to 2 minutes to get through it. So that's something that is ongoing as well. And then we've also added a lot of cameras to portables. So, in spots where we had portables outside the building, in some cases, the existing camera was in a bad spot with that portable being put in. And so we've added cameras like to the backs of portables and stuff to eliminate some of those blind spots. And then as far as future projects go, there's always a lot of stuff on the list, of course. I did want to, again, highlight a couple of security projects. I mentioned camera replacements. That's one that's pretty high on our list. As well, our door controllers are about the same age as all the cameras. They got put in at about the same time. Alarm panels in a lot of our buildings are pretty dated. Many of them still rely on telephone lines, which tells you a little bit about the age of them. Updating those would give us a lot more ability to do some integrations and things with some of these other systems we have. Vestibule remodels we've talked about a little bit. And then another project that's high on our list is adding access control to portables. That technology's improved a lot over the last few years, and so now you can do it wirelessly, which we're excited to try out on a few portables to make those even more secure than they are. Another project that might come to you for approval at some point is updating the cabling or fiber in a couple of buildings. We just have a few more that need to be updated there. So, and then last slide. One thing the curriculum audit highlighted is some of our technology planning. And so we've been working on a draft for a new tech plan to run from roughly 2019 to 2023. We'll see, I might shorten it or lengthen it depending on how it looks. But that will include an instructional framework, instructional technology targets for students and staff, as well as some equipment and software standards and some infrastructure goals. So look for that. That'll kind of follow behind the rest of the work that's currently being done on the rest of the curriculum audit. So, and with that, I'll stand for your questions.
Okay, thank you, Seth. Lots of information there. Always a good report, so thank you for your time on that. Any questions for Seth?
I don't have any questions, but thank you very much. It was very complete and very interesting. Appreciate all the work you're doing in the security part. Interests me a lot too.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, a lot of good information there, and just exciting to see that we're continuing to do this work and make improvements to our system, not just in security, but everywhere. But nice to see what we're doing in security and technology. In your staffing totals there, that did not include the SROs also, right?
Right, because SROs are
outside the
they're contracted through the city, so technically they're city employees, so I did not include them in my staffing totals.
All right, thank you very much. All right, next up, item H, Lakes Magnet Middle School name change.
I'd like to
Dr.
introduce
Cook,
Jeff
go ahead.
Bankston to come up to the podium.
Took me an hour to figure out.
Good evening, members of the board, Dr. Cook. First, I just want to thank you. If you haven't been by Lakes lately, you really should go by and see the work that you helped put in place. And thank you for authorizing the alternate bids as well. So that's coming along nicely. I don't know if it's going to be as ready as we would like it to be, but I know they are moving as fast as they can. They have 50 to 60 people on site working each and every day, so it's been pretty cool to see. I'm here today to answer any questions you may have about our request to change our name back to Lakes Middle School from Lakes Magnet, and I was not the principal when it was changed to the Magnet, so I don't know the process that they may have gone through at that time. But we sat down as our leadership team, and I think you have a letter in there in your packet, and I can go through that, or I can just answer any questions that you may have to see where we are. We did do a survey, and I believe there were 105 responses. I think it was 94% in favor of returning to Lakes Middle School. The Magnet designation has been a little confusing to people over the years. We aren't doing away with the 8th period class. We're just changing the name on that. We now call that a discovery class rather than magnet. And we think it's less confusing to our students as well as our community members. So I would take any questions you may have on that.
Okay, questions for Mr. Bankston? We have to have some because he's sat here for 2 hours.
I was worried you were doing away with your 8th period, so I'm glad to hear. Yeah, because
no, absolutely not. No, we just it just was confusing as to what was going on. So no, we have we look at that every year. We really have put a lot of time and effort into making that an enrichment period for our students, a remediation period for our students, and they get an opportunity to explore a lot of things in our area. So no, we don't have any intention of doing away with that. We surveyed our staff, we surveyed our students, we talked to our parents about it, and it's overwhelming. They're in support of that
Every
piece.
student that I talk to says that's the highlight of their time.
They do. They really do. And I know at times for our staff, I mean, that's an extra prep. We have actually lengthened our day as compared to the other middle schools. And so Lake's teachers put in more time to do that. But we also know it benefits our kids, and that's why we're there.
I love how you included the students on the vote of the 8th period.
We did. We surveyed them, and they were overwhelmed. We actually asked them what courses they would like to see in there too. Yeah. And so as we have teacher retirements or teachers move on, and we get a new staff member come in, we can talk to them about what is a passion they have for our students. So.
Yeah, that period is a good period of the connection and relationship building, which is so very important with all of our students. So I was happy to see that stay as well.
It's staying.
Okay, so this is an information item. We're not taking action on it tonight. It will be out for public comment early for the next 30 days, and it will come back to us next month for action. So that's the process on it. Any other questions?
Here's hoping your construction goes well.
It's going well. It's a large, I think it's a much larger project than it really looked. I mean, it's you need to walk through it and check it out. It's quite a scene.
Maybe we can do a tour.
Yeah, I would like to do a tour too. I saw some pictures and they looked amazing, and I thought, wow, I really want to get in there and see it.
You should see it in the process it's in right now. I mean, go in the locker rooms and see what's been torn out. And I can't remember the reporter that was here this evening, but Devin, she wrote a great article on what's going on. And so it really is neat to see what's happening throughout the whole building.
Yeah, we were talking about that today. I had an opportunity to talk with her, and she had said, have you been in Lakes? And she was talking about the mural done I said, I actually have seen that and pictures. And I said, I know the pictures don't do it justice of what's going on, and really wanted to get in there. And she talked about how awesome it was and really impressed. So.
Tour it now and then come back at the end of November when the whole project is completed. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Bingston. All right, next up is item I, the administrative resolution. This has kind of been a standing agenda item for us over the last few months. And as you saw in the packet, a number of these things we've already discussed tonight. But Dr. Cook, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, I think a couple of things. First of all, I want to give you an update. And I would ask, she doesn't know I'm going to do this, so she's going to be irritated with me. I'd ask Dr. Roscoe to come up also to the podium. She and I and Dr. Cottle have spent a tremendous amount of time over the last month locked behind closed doors, working through a lot of things and working on a draft plan for the curriculum audit. I would just like her to speak maybe to kind of the process that we've gone through. And just kind of from her perspective, share with you how we've been pulling out. One of the things that in essence what we're doing, it's so much more than just diving into the audit and turning it into something that's consumable, but in essence trying to take something this broad and how does it align with the work we're doing with Profile of a Graduate, the audit, the specials, the futures report that we did in special ed last year, and turn it into something that aligns to a set of beliefs and goal statements that would have trackable action items that we can then present to you as a draft form for this proposal. And so we're calling it a work plan. And the more and more I look at this item as the administrative resolution kind of audit monthly update, I think it's time that we, especially now that the rezoning is kind of on its way, that maybe we need to rename this item now, because it's starting to become work plan. It's starting to become something that will eventually be a draft plan that you guys will tear apart, dive into in a workshop, and provide us feedback. But I would love to hear her side of this. I promise you, we haven't even rehearsed this. This is just kind of in the moment.
You're so in trouble. I don't know how many hours we've spent together, Dr. Cottle and Dr. Cook and I, and we believed that in order to sort of refine and focus our leadership on the improvements that are suggested in the curriculum audit, that we needed to agree and understand it so well together as a system that we could propose a smaller, more synthesized document in order to begin to have the conversation with our leaders and with you and with our community about what next steps to take. So at one point, I think we had decided that we were going to be moving a system, and it would be helpful to use system language to describe what's in the audit. So we agreed to sort of categorize all of the recommendations, that we'd go straight to the recommendations, and we would think about those in terms of systems language. What's the culture? What are the beliefs that we need to embrace, or that we do embrace and that are obvious in the audit? What are the competencies, so the skills and dispositions that have to improve in our leadership, in our teaching and learning, and our assistants? So what are those competencies that we need to target? What are the conditions that would require that? Things like schedules and time and resource allocation and all of that. What are the resources? What are the conditions that we need to address? And then finally, what would be the next action steps? So our strategy, right or wrong, was we'd read one set. We'd read the first recommendation. The three of us would reread that recommendation, and we would give each other a couple minutes without interrupting one another to just say what came out of those pages for each of us. And then we set about the work of arguing about what needed to be, then what are the beliefs that we would stand by? What's the hill we're going to die on? What are the beliefs in that recommendation? And what are the competencies that we need to work on in our leadership? What are the conditions that are going to have to change in our schools and in our district? And what would be the next steps? We ended up calling that the synthesis document, because it was our attempt to synthesize all of those pages of recommendations. When we took that document to several groups, one of the groups was our district cabinet team, and we said, here it is, folks. We gave them some time to read it, and we asked them for feedback, and then we took it to our instructional core. And we think that it is abundantly clear as you look at that there's a lot of overlap, that if we attack one area, a lot of other things will get better, but that it's really hard to extricate one effort from that, from all of that work. So we know that some things seem obvious to us. Hence, I think you saw a proposal for Scott Murphy to spend time with us as a leadership team. Our leadership needs to get really refined and focused and really courageous. Our teachers need a ton of support to really talk about pedagogy and curriculum. So there's just a lot of work we need to do. And I think we all came out alive, and that's a good sign. And I think that we got some great feedback from our colleagues about, okay, now what next? And so we're still refining that. And in a few days they're going to be here. So is that kind of what you expected?
Yeah, and I think one of the next steps, we're trying to get you guys scheduled for a workshop in which we can present that information to you, and what part of this would be an internal document that is kind of how we go about this, and what part of this would be the external document about where we're going to drive this for the community for the next 3 to 5 years, and how we would, what those commitments look like, and what are the outcomes we would expect to see across the system if we were to deliver upon all aspects of this in 5 years. Where would we be? And so that's, I think, at the last point we were looking for some dates in late August for us to kind of present this to you as something to chew on. And so we're going to, in the meantime, we're going to keep sending this in front of groups and saying, tear it up, let us know what you think, and give us the feedback. And so eventually out of this will come kind of the rails of our strategic plan that we would eventually, once everybody's had a chance to provide feedback and give us the data and the information we're looking for to build this as a collective, so the entire community can own this for the school district.
May I add one?
One of my questions, sorry, was how are we looping in our building administrators and getting their voices as well, because they're our leaders in the schools. And so the fact that you said, getting this out to as many groups as possible is awesome. So thank you for the time and the back and forth that probably went on and that I know goes on, so that we're doing what's best for kids ultimately and for our district. So thank you.
I wanted to add just one quick thing, if I may, and that is that I think Dr. Cook has done a good job of helping us remember that there's this, as you read it, as you know, there's this sense of urgency, like we got to get going. And you know how that is. You can get going in a lot of wrong places, or you can take the 5th step instead of the first step that you should take. So what I wanted to thank you as a board for is supporting our opportunity for professional development with Ed Leader 21. Our days in Ohio gave us a real good thinking head start about, while we discern with our building leaders and with our board and with our community which steps to take next, we were able to say there are some things that we know that we can start doing right now in terms of our leadership and our support for classroom teachers. So we were able to sort of outline that for ourselves. And we have 2 big days with our leaders coming up in August, our building leaders, where we're going to be able to look at this.
So Dr. Cook mentioned it. We're looking for a workshop towards the end of August, and I believe we're waiting on a potential case for Miss Brumley there or something. So after tomorrow, we'll throw a couple more dates out there, because the couple we've tried haven't worked out for all 5 of us yet. So. Okay. So hopefully we'll know tomorrow on that, and then how's the community involvement kind of in that, I guess, and where's that at? When's that?
Yeah,
on?
so
How are we doing that, or are we still working on that?
So that'll be a part of this. It won't be early on as just kind of this initial, in this workshop would be like this initial exposure. Here's where we're getting ready to go into the community with this. We're going to work on that too. Scott Maben is inside in there right now, sweating bullets, wondering if I'm going to make him come out here and talk about that. But that's a part of this too, is what does this look like when, and some of this is a little bit of the how the educators are going to do some of this work. Some of this is, what is my kid going to experience that's different? And so we use language like internal facing and external facing, because the internal facing community wants to see that, but external facing is, what's that mean for my kid? And so there's really 2 paths that we're going to have to talk about. And so is it all mapped out? We've already kind of roughed out. Scott and I have talked quite a bit about this, is how does this journey get going with community's involvement, opportunity to engage in both of those, internal and external. So we want to start with you guys, produce this for use, get that feedback started, and then start rolling it out into the community and then collect that feedback as well. Now, whether that's going to be through surveys, through meetings, through community group conversations, we're going to need to do all of that, because there's no way, even when it's a synthesis document, it's a big document. There's still a lot there. So.
Is the information that you guys gleaned from the portraits of the graduate work going to be included in this meeting that we have? I feel like there's a whole bunch of information that you guys have that I'm just curious what it looks like. And
Yeah, it's the beginnings of it. It will be, because when it comes right down to it, the portrait of a graduate is an outcome, right? Like, here's what we want for all of our kids, and so we would say that's the product. Then the work plan is, what are all the internal things that we would have to produce and do in the system to create this output for our kids. And so there's we wind up doing this conversation at a 30,000 foot level, then you dive really deep into specific things that need to exist in classrooms and what that might look like, how we would support it, how we would develop, how we would train people or provide opportunity or resource. And then the next part of that is, what is the kid experience? So that you wind up with this other view from the outside looking at that profile of a graduate as, here's what we'd want for our kids. How do we make sure that all those pieces are being produced and supported in the classroom? And so it's looking at it from this side, and then from high and low. That's been my experience, has been that you can't do any one piece without the other lens as well. So yes, we're going to have to have a point in which, first of all, we put it in front of you guys and say, give us what you think. And then once we have that feedback, then we take it out in the community and say, let us know what you think. Where are we at on this? Are we missing it? Do you feel like your kid is being served by this set of outcomes? Do you feel like these are the things that you would want for your kid?
Part of what Dr. Cook and I discussed is really the workshop will allow us kind of an opportunity to get a deeper dive, to spend a lot of time on one document that would be difficult to do in a board meeting, right? Our board meetings are long enough, and if we added a 2-hour conversation to it, they're ridiculous. And so really allows us to have that long conversation outside of a board meeting, and then probably starting in September, we'll have this standing agenda item that's just going to be work plan. And so every month we may talk about little pieces, or they may say, well, we went out and we talked to these groups, and here's the feedback we're hearing. And there'll be kind of more brief updates that are appropriate for a board meeting that we'll start seeing in September. But that first workshop is going to be a deeper dive, probably one of many. What you probably don't know yet, or maybe you do, I can't remember if Lynn put it out there, but we're going to look in September for probably an all-day event for us, or at least a 6-hour thing with lunch for us, where we'll look at the work plan, some of the visioning stuff that Kate talked about, or Dr. Cook talked about, kind of our beliefs. Last year around this time we talked about a board handbook, and we haven't really done anything with it over the last 12 months. So Lynn and I are going to kind of fire that conversation back up, and we may bring some of those belief statements to be part of that handbook. So we'd be doing that at that workshop or that retreat, and also superintendent evaluation goal work that needs to be done. So we'll have a big day in September for that. One other thing just on this agenda item I want to point out is the start time committee, or I don't even know what we call that group, but that's going to look at school start times. I believe that application deadline is approaching.
Yeah.
Another couple of weeks?
Coming up pretty quick, I think.
A week or so?
In a couple of weeks. I don't know if Scott can either text me or shoot me the date, but I know it's not far away.
Okay. So just want to highlight that we do have that secondary start time. It's really not even secondary, it's start time. School start time ad hoc committee. There's an application on the district website. According to our packet, we've got around 37 applicants thus far, so pretty good turnout. 28 of those are community members. So as we predicted, a lot of interest around that, and another week or two for people to get their names in on that. And assuming we'll see that next month, probably some committee recommendations. Yep. On that. Okay, thank you. Next up is a facility update from Mr. Voller. We kind of got a preview from Principal Bingston there on his building, but
So we're going to do something slightly different for this update. Scott Mabin had a drone come in and take aerial footage of all of our schools, and so he was able to capture some of the construction at Lakes Middle School specifically. And so I think he was having fun with this, and he put a lot of this together into kind of a video / slideshow type thing. So I'm going to ask him just to play it and just watch it through, and then I'll highlight a few of the things that are going on with the facilities. No. I think some of the aerial perspectives are kind of cool to look at it from that angle and, see that really the size of Lakes Middle School especially, and, know that what we're adding is quite substantial to that school. They're moving along at Lakes. It's really buzzing out there. I think Principal Bankston kind of highlighted a few things going on out there, and I was out there this morning, and there's just people kind of buzzing everywhere on that. And the choir rooms, probably the furthest along. They're drywalling in there right now and finishing that. So it just needs flooring to come in, and then the drop ceiling, and that will be a finished classroom ready to go. They're drywalling in the offices right now. So same thing, moving along there. So with a real push to have that ready for staff to start moving in. And you can see in the walls looking out to the back of the gym, they're capped out on there. The trusses have started to come in on that. We're probably going to slow down work on the gyms to make sure we focus on the areas of classrooms and learning so that we can get that going. The mechanical trades are working all throughout. And I think one of the things that's really unique about this project is it's almost like 4 or 5 projects separately. I mean, if you got to walk around that entire school, and we mentioned that it would be nice to set up a time for you guys as a board to come through and tour that facility. And I have a meeting on Wednesday with the construction team, so I'll talk that through with them, and we'll look at a couple different options and make sure you guys have an opportunity to go out there and tour what's going on out there. But if you walk around, you really have to walk around the entire campus to capture everything, because you're working in one corner on the offices, you're working in a completely opposite corner on the gym and band room, and then way out back is the track that they've got going in right now, and that's roughed in, ready for concrete asphalt to come in on that. And so you just really have to kind of circumnavigate the entire building, and the media room is. Sometimes it looks big, sometimes it looks small, and it's kind of this process and these tricks that your mind plays as you go through the construction process of it. But to see that now completing, capturing that horseshoe, that U in there, is pretty cool to see where that's going to be, and then to look at the curve of the front entry where the hallway is going to connect that to connect that U is pretty cool. I think that's going to be a real striking feature for that school. So it is moving along. We're continuing to push the contractors and the architects to just keep moving along, and they are confident they will hit our deadlines of being open and ready for school, but it will be a push to the very end. The good news is windows are here, and half the windows are already in. So we will have windows in this school when we start. So that's the good news I have to report to you tonight. And then, so jumping over to the new elementary school, as you can see in the pictures there, things are starting to move along there. The building permit should be issued tomorrow was the last word that we heard. So fingers crossed that we have a building permit by the end of the day tomorrow. In the meantime, the city did give us permission to clear the site, so which means we were able to scrub off all the topsoil. So all those big mounds of dirt you saw there, all the topsoil that they're pulling off of that site. They're keeping about 6,000 yards of topsoil that they're screening right now, and they're going to put that on the field over that Greenstone owns, and then we'll bring that back in, and that'll be kind of the top dressing of the playground and things when we finish out. But there's probably 20 times that amount that is actually being trucked off right now, and so there's kind of this little flow of just trucks coming through. The excavators are loading, and then they're hauling that topsoil off, so getting rid of that. You could also see the structural fill that was going in there. So we've kind of roughed out where the building site will be, and they're bringing in structural fill, compacting where the school will go. So they have to kind of bring it up to raise it, as actually between those three properties it sort of dips down and comes back up. So there was a good bit of structural fill that needed to go in there. So those are things that they're able to work on right now. And so once the building permit is fully issued, then they'll be able to start excavating for foundation and forming for foundation. So I would guess in the next week to week and a half, we'll start to see that work progressing there. We also received the temporary approach permit from Lakes Highway District, so that means we can have a temporary access off during construction off of Prairie. And the main access will be off of Moselle and coming through the subdivision. And they one of the pictures in there showed the kind of the thick rock. That's kind of the mud zone where the trucks can come and lose mud off their tires and that kind of stuff before they get onto the city streets. That's the transition area. So work is moving along there, and we are looking forward to having a formal building permit and really cranking full speed on that one, and more info to come as we continue to move along for the elementary school. So that's all I have to report today, unless there's any questions.
I have just one on the parking lot at Lakes. That was kind of a late ad that we did. Is that anticipated to be done before school starts?
No, that'll be done. That'll be done into probably October with that. And right now it's a staging area, so really they have not done a lot for it. Because they're staging all their equipment and materials in that area. So it's torn up. I mean, it'll be ready to set up and go when they're ready. But that'll be one of the latter things to finish.
But done before the weather turns.
Yes. Yeah. Before and while we can still get asphalt.
Right.
So yeah.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for Jeff?
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Looks like you're up there again for the next one.
So I want to set this one up. This is actually this enrollment projections is really a 3-part presentation. This will be one that will kind of go into the school year going, here's what we expect to see. Then next month we'll do here's what's showing up, and then in October we'll do kind of this, here's how we're reconciling it. Here's the adjustments we've had to make, which would include things like if we've had to transfer kids to other schools because of capacity or those kinds of things. And so kind of wanted to start this conversation before enrollment becomes a mechanism for funding, because this is a really good way to start to get a picture of what how we try to manage the process for you all as well. We push hard to find out if there are kindergartners out there, and we do a lot of work on kindergartner roundup, but we know there will be some kids that will show up the first day of school that we've never seen, never heard from, and we're going to take them. And so part of this is my request that these guys have entertained, my request to kind of walk you through the month before school, the month of school, and the month after school started, to do that as a kind of a package three part series. So
thanks. we divided our presentation for you trustees. We divided it into these 4 categories, kind of important dates. Dr. Cook mentioned that it's kind of a 3-part series, so when do all those meetings actually kind of start and how do those progress? We wanted to look at current enrollment numbers, the challenges that we face when we think about enrollment and placement, and finally some guidelines and commitments that have formed our work a little bit when it comes to student placement, because we've needed to come up with what felt like a rationale for some of our decisions in the best interests of our students. So this almost not legible list is a list of the meetings that our meetings and deadlines that influence our registration and our placement. And notice in March that those 2 windows, the Sorensen and Ramsey magnet windows, have tremendous impact on the rest of us because it's kind of a dominoes effect, right? Once we know which children make it into those 2 lottery systems, then we begin to realize differences in enrollment and registration in our other schools. But so that's mostly a list of windows, and it's a list of meetings clear up from March clear to September 4th on the first day of school. But what might be more helpful is I highlighted in red there. Those are the actual meetings of the elementary administrators when they plan, when we start talking about rolling kids up, when we start talking about staff members, attrition with staff members, and so that starts late March. The 2 most gut-wrenching meetings are in August. August 19th this year, we'll meet once we've seen some good days of registration, and we'll talk about the hot spots. Where do we have kids with no teacher, or where do we have overages, that sort of thing. And then we come together on the 23rd to say, do we still need to do some switching? And I know, I think Casey and maybe Elise, I know several board members have been in on, we call those kind of, Tambra, you were too, weren't you, Tambra? On those war room meetings where it's crazy routing and that sort of thing. In yellow, which didn't turn out at all, in yellow are all of the meetings and dates that we had this year to address the full day kindergarten, which I think we would all expect. But we started planning full day K on April 3rd. Application windows were open. We had kindergarten registration. And then if you go down to May 10th, we had the full day kindergarten lottery draw. Principals who were going to have lottery picks because there are waiting lists for all our full day kindergarten. That lottery draw was interesting for us. We had to make some determinations because, as you recall, we set aside 5 seats in those classrooms to hold for kids in other classrooms who would need that support. So anyway, that was brand new ground for us. And then finally in June, Jeff pulled our team together. We started to talk about what do we actually need for these classrooms. Let's in terms of staffing and supplies and that sort of thing. So that's been an ongoing process. I'm disappointed that this doesn't show up more clearly. I'm sure Seth could do something about that in the booth. Oh, you do? Okay, thank you. I wanted to bring that to your attention because, as you can see, in July, our enrollment ended at 5,033. Those were our last enrollment numbers. Last year, they were exactly 4,933. So they were exactly, yeah. So we ended with a few more kids, of course. I wanted to mention to you that all of the red boxes, I don't know if you understood the coding there, but all of the red boxes represent children, over our classroom targets, right? And so places like when you see down at Winton where there's a red box around 21, that literally means that there are 21 kindergartners already registered at Winton, and we don't have a teacher for those because we have 3 sections. Winton is built for 3 sections per grade level. So It's not unusual for us to see these red boxes going into August. That's not unusual. We have Plan A and Plan B and Plan C. Originally, we had a plan that those would be kids that we would probably bring to Ramsey. However, Ramsey's getting lots of kindergartners. I talked with Mrs. Cabista the other day on the telephone, and she said those numbers are really filling in. The other thing you might have thought that was odd was that you looked at the blue box. We have one blue box on there. That represents a teacher with no kids yet. And so you see at Bora, there's a blue box there. You see one at Bryan, and you see one at, not a blue box at Bryan, but you see 7 kinders there with in one classroom, and for Nan, there's 10 in a classroom. We know from experience all of those classrooms will fill, and then some. Those are our classrooms where families will come, in the next weeks and register for school. We're confident of that because we know the trends. So we wanted to bring this to your awareness because we'll discuss it more when we talk about the challenges that we have with enrollment and registration. Would you add anything to that particular slide? No. Okay. I'm going to ask in a minute, I'm going to ask Jeff to talk about space, but we all know, we passed a levy, we know that we have growth challenges. That, those are kind of conditions for a perfect storm. We're increasing in enrollment, we have limited space, and we have good, solid promises to our community about class size targets. And those are the 3 things that cause us the headaches a little bit when we start thinking about how do we honor our children and create enough space in our classrooms to do good work. So Jeff has a couple slides here that give us pause, and it's stuff I think you've been hearing at long range planning, and you've been hearing up here at the podium. But this represents a crystal ball.
Kate, can I ask you a quick question before we move on from the graph, that cool chart you have?
Yeah.
So a lot of these, like Skyway, I see has 15 for first grade. So most likely those kids were force transferred last year. Is that correct? And now you regroup them back into their home boundary or district?
One of the guidelines that we have is that if a child is force transferred to another school, that family has priority about whether that child wants to go back to the home school. Sometimes, as you know, the children create strong friendships and community, and what we say is if they want to stay in their new school and they can provide their own transportation, they can do that. More often than not, families want to return to their home school for all kinds of reasons, right? But so you mentioned Skyway at first grade. Is that what you mentioned?
There's 15,
Yeah, there are 15 children sitting there with no teacher. So we start immediately talking about where in that area can we shuttle those kids, and that'll be part of our conversation later, right?
It's amazing how your chart just illuminates where we're most overcrowded. I mean,
it sure does. It sure does. Well, and quite frankly, this chart is typical for this time of year, because at this time of year we see families who have registered and they've turned in their paperwork. This chart changes dramatically at the end of August and the beginning of September, when all the other families come in and register right before and right after Labor Day. Yeah.
But I think what strikes me is after reading the curriculum audit and they talk about the inequity in forced transferring, and then you see it here, pre-decisions before you guys have your August 23rd meeting, and you know that many of these kids will be on a bus going to a school that they don't want to go to, and it's heartbreaking.
Oh.
Yeah, I feel bad about that.
Yeah. About mid-August, many of us stopped sleeping. Yeah.
So these slides here really are representing growth. And I think a lot of this is probably going to be reviewed. This is some of the discussions we've been having ongoing. But I just captured a portion of a slide here just to kind of talk about the new elementary school and the growth surrounding it, just as kind of a reminder. And really, this kind of growth is going on all over our district. But kind of the upside down T that you see in the upper left-hand corner, that's the Vista Meadows development that you see going in. The black portion is that asphalt that's brand new in there. And then the 3 lots to the right are where the new elementary school will go. As you continue to move to the right, that fescue loop, that's plotted with the Copper Basin apartments. And then also the perpendicular to that vacant lot will be now also Copper Basin, and then the one directly below that as well that's parallel to that triangle above the subdivision that you see in that bottom middle are all going to be the Copper Basin apartments totaling 240 units. And then you've also have that field over to the right that, we don't know what that's going to be in the future. And, that's something to keep an eye on, like what's going to happen in that area. And then this will be directly to the south of that. So that's the Greenstone development that we know is going to come in there. So, if we look at all of those, we're looking at, if what we know from our statistics with the actually in this slide as well, in the bottom right-hand corner, you have it's called the Northern at Coeur d'Alene Place. So those are the new apartments that you see kind of across the street from Lake City High School going in there. Lisa, you look like you have a question. Do you have? Okay. Yeah. And so, with the Northern, there's going to be 294 units at full build-out. We'd expect 53 students coming out of there. Copper Basin at 240 units, we'd expect 43 students potentially coming out of there. And the Coeur d'Alene Place, 550 single-family homes, we'd expect 350 students coming out of there. So that's 446 students just in that area alone that could potentially, fill that school. So
that's K-12.
Yeah, that would
Those
be.
numbers would be
Yeah,
K-12.
that would be K-12. So that would diverse. That's not just elementary students going in through there. But population growth, high density has impact on us, and we're trying to locate where are those pockets of high density. But there's also who's to say that a developer is going to come in and buy 6 to 8 to 10 lots somewhere that have homes on them right now and tear those down and put in high density developments in there. So, we're seeing those kinds of things happen as well. So some of them we can predict, some of them may surprise us a little bit. And the other thing that I just kind of want to highlight too is we're talking about growth and some of the equity, and this is some of what we'll talk about in the boundary rezoning as well, is to talk about the apartments that we have. And I think I mentioned this in our workshop a little bit as well, but just to highlight it. So if you take, of our 13 elementary schools, of our 11, if you take not the 9 of them, and I'm taking Bora and Winton out of this, the average percentage of our enrollment is rounding up 7% of the enrollment of our students that are in apartments going to those schools. So then if you look at Bora, we have 22% of those students are in apartments. And if you look at Winton, 37% of those students are in apartments. So how do we create some equity and some balance in there? So, growth is an issue for us. And as our schools are at or over capacity, that's going to continue to be a problem and something that we need to really continue to look at and be aware of. So I don't think I probably said anything that really have shocked you guys, but I think it's important to just continue to have that conversation and reminders of what we're
Is
seeing.
Greenstone giving you updates when they're going to start their housing, the single-family home housing development with the 400 and some homes?
For Greenstone?
Yeah.
I think we're hearing in the next...
It is going on?
Yeah, they've started that already.
Yeah, and then developing out over the next 5 to 7 years. So,
I think I would guess they sold out of phase 1 last year. It seems like they add some more pavement this year, so they're
Right.
probably in their phase 2 of it. They're developing currently like right across from Skyway Soccer Complex. That's where they started on that end.
right in there.
Just north of Canfield Street. Moselle actually curves around right north of Canfield, and that's where they're building right now.
Yeah, that's that's where you see the dirt road there. You can see the first row of houses there. So that was phase 1, and then I think they're moving. I don't know, to that next chunk there.
Yeah. So growth is coming, it's happening, and it's going to have impact as we continue to move on, and we just need to be aware of it and continue a long-range plan to address it.
One of our challenges is just honoring children's current community. Once in, always in was simply our community's way of saying, let's preserve the learning life of a child. So whether in whatever way a child ended up in a community, whether it was an open enrollment transfer or a forced transfer, what we've tried to do is preserve those relationships because we know what happens when children move schools. We know what that, how disruptive that is to their learning life. So that creates all kinds of craziness, however, for us. It seems absolutely reasonable to turn to a family if they've had a child, if they've had open enrollment and they've had a child in a school, and say they're in 4th grade. And we'd say, absolutely. For instance, you should finish off your last 2 years or your last 3 years or your last year at that school. It's where your friends are. It's where the teachers it's your community. We get that. We don't want to disrupt that. And then we turn around 180 degrees and there's the family who's moved into the area and who says, you have no room for my child because your school's full. So that challenge, meeting everyone's needs, that challenge is really tough for us. In addition,
Sorry, can I ask you on that one? Is that on forced? Those are students that were forced transferred?
What we're saying is forced transferred students get to stay if they choose and can go home if they choose because we know what we've done by forcing them. Mm-hmm. But in terms of open enrollment, we've said to families, you can stay in that school because we're preserving families and relationships. When we think about not doing that, for instance, we think about a family and we say, well, that was well and good when you were in 3rd grade, but in 4th grade, that we have way too many kids. You need to go back to your home school. The difficulty that creates is there are ripples that people don't think about. For instance, what about siblings then? Do they all need to return? And then once they return to their home schools, is there really room? Is there room in every one of those grades for each of those returning kids? Often not. And if they I'm going into details that you don't need to hear about, and I'm sure, but it creates tremendous difficulty. So we've tried really hard to sort of keep families together and keep kids in their communities, but it comes at a price. And that wouldn't be such a big deal if we weren't this full, right? If we didn't have this kind of growth.
I guess my question is, so when do we make that change? Because before I lived in Hayden, we knew we were moving to Hayden, so we were open enrolling our daughter from... She was really in Bryan. We were going to Hayden Meadows because we knew we were moving that way. And for the first 2 or 3 years, that's the way it was. And we had to apply every year for that.
Right.
And then you didn't know until August 25th whether they were going there or not. So you actually enrolled them in both schools, basically. Or they made you enroll in Bryan.
And then you put in your transfer paperwork, right? And you were on this wait list. And I think it was... first year I was here, Casey, I'm not sure, but I remember we began to switch it because what we were discovering was all the other stuff. If we say, we're going to have to send you back to your home school, but not all of you. Your 2nd grader and your 3rd grader and your 1st grader is going to stay here because they don't have room for her. So, we weren't solving our problems very well that way. And we were creating lots of stress for families, probably like yours, who waited till the end of August to find out if their kids were going to get to be with their friends and their teachers. And yeah.
It probably makes sense if people are willing to transport their kids and they want to go to a school and there's room at that school to let them go to that school, as opposed to saying, no, you have to go to your home school, and now all of a sudden you got to find kids at the home school to force transfer somewhere.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, it just...
Yeah, it's a very tight domino dance that we play.
That's where this conversation winds up coming down to, is a value of what gets to be higher on the priority list, once in, always in, or homeschool. And this is not a simple solution, but the bottom line is something is going to be the first indicator. And right now, the way we're delivering this, the first indicator is this idea of once in, always in. And it means that we are telling parents on occasion that you can't go to the school that you just bought a house a block away from that school because that school's already full. And that's one of those conversations that's really difficult for some people to hear. I'm not saying that we need to change that. I'm saying that is a conversation. Right now, there's no quality solution for either of those because we don't have space anywhere. But once we open this school next year, there's going to be some conversations in which we're going to have to talk about what are the value statements that we're going to live by when it comes to when you allow open enrollment and choice, you're going to create schools that have some higher need or want or desire than other schools. And so how you go through those asks are going to be very, very critical for how we decide what those value statements might be.
And I think we're hoping our community conversations guided by Flo will help us with some of that, right? Yeah. Transportation and school shuttles. We are increasing, each year we're increasing routes. This year 14 shuttles, correct? 14 shuttles. The year before that, it was 11 shuttles. So these are shuttles between schools, hauling children, sometimes kindergartners, hauling children to schools that are not their home schools. That is painful. Kids are missing learning time when they're on those shuttles. And I have to tell you, it's heroic what's happening at our schools to get the kids off the bus and to get them breakfast and to get them into their classroom and to make them feel warmed and welcomed, and all of those things really are amazing. It somewhat mitigates, but not completely, right? Some kids make great friends on those shuttles, and some kindergartners get off wherever they feel like it. Just happens. We have discovered the importance of protecting fragile families, and those are families that are facing all kinds of challenges. Sometimes it's sickness, chronic sickness. Often it's financial challenges. They're often the families who come to us post Labor Day and register, and then because that's when they could finally find an apartment, or they could finally find space, or they've landed a job, or and the children come. And what we've done in the past is we've said, well, you're too late. Sorry, we're going to put you on a bus and you're going to go across town because after all, you were the last to register. We don't do that anymore. And I'll speak about what we do, but we really try hard because we know those little ones need a fighting chance, and we're going to do everything we can to help them get that. We would love more data and information to guide our decisions. For instance, I'd love to stand up here and tell you how many of those kids who are on shuttles, what's their SES, right? How far do they travel exactly? When did they register? How many of the kids who are on shuttles are because of a late registration? We can't yet give you that information, but we are so encouraged by what we will be able to give you with the new software. Right now, we can't. For instance, if you register in last July and you register 5 days before school starts, you're in Skyward, your enrollment date is the first day of school. So we aren't able to track that. I'll tell you one thing that Jay was able to tell me. He said of the 24 kids that they could track last year that actually registered after school began, 20 of those were kids who qualified for free and reduced lunch. But we would like much better data to make much more informed decisions.
It would be interesting to see their test scores.
Yeah, and we know a lot. That's a great point, yeah. It's just disruptive to a child's life. It just is. We have some guidelines, and they're well-intended, and they don't solve our problems, but we use them. And one of them is that what we've just been talking about. We place kids who are currently attending the school and live in the school zone. And then we had to add, or don't live in the school zone, because that's keeping kids in the schools where they are, right? Children from fragile families who need special consideration. We have, for instance, I'm aware of one family who has a very sick child, and they've had to move to another school. Normally, we would tell them, apply at your new school now, because you've moved out, you've made that choice to move to that other school. You're going to need to apply if you want to stay at your school. This family needs every bit of community support that they can get to rally around their child and themselves, and we're absolutely going to let them stay at that school where they've been going for several years. Displaced students who would like to return to their home school or stay in their new schools provided they have transportation. We've discussed that. New siblings of students currently enrolled in the school living in the school zone. New in-district children out of our school zone. They're down at the bottom, right? That's the open enrollment kid. And then out of district siblings, remember we grandfathered all the children from other districts. Well, they still seem to have brothers and sisters. So, and finally, we just don't accept out of district families. We just can't. And when people need answers, and I know that some of you trustees are probably captured in the grocery aisle about when will my family know. New out-of-district applicants, that's easy. That answer's no. And then we answer our in-district families, and then we are able to answer our out-of-district families with siblings. So there's a kind of a hierarchy of who gets to know when, because it's about space. Do you have anything else about facilities or transportation or anything?
Just from a transportation standpoint, I think, Kate mentioned, and I think going through this exercise has identified a few areas that we have some weaknesses of just not having accurate data. And talking with Jill a little bit as well, I think the TransFinder will help us to capture some of this data of, exactly which students are on those routes, especially in the transfers, and, really identify those students short of just calling all the schools and saying, okay, which students are going here and where. And, so I think we have some improvements that are forthcoming that will help us in the future with this, but unfortunately we don't have some of those immediate answers right now to give you guys the accurate data that we would like to. But I do think we're pointing in the right direction to help get us there as we continue to move forward and process through this.
Okay, any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you. We're running long here, so I think we'll just keep things moving. But if you need to get up and get something to drink or use the bathroom or whatever, you go ahead and.
What's that?
I blame Dr. Cook.
I shouldn't have done it.
Feel free to go up, and we'll invite Dr. Nelson up, and I'll turn it over to Dr. Cook just to kick off our next section there. We're towards the end.
This is actually a pretty exciting presentation. We're glad to present this to you. Dr. Nelson's got some good data on AP scores and dual enrollment and how those things are kind of intertwined and how they're not. I think he's got some great graphs to show you, and I'm excited to have him present this to you.
Well, thank you. Chair Morris-Rowe, Dr. Cook, and members of the board, good evening. We're almost there. Per your request, we have some information to share with you regarding advanced opportunities in the rise of dual credit, as well as some outstanding scores in our AP exams this year. I do want to remind you that everything that we post is available at our district website, so it's not that we're hiding anything beyond the back. The biggest thing that we have to keep in mind first is that we recognize that students have multiple pathways to be able to achieve their academic goals within our district. We've shared with you the link for the course description handbook. We launched that this last year with our counselors. And in secondary specifically, starting in grade 8, students are working on their course pathways, their 4-year plans. We provide for them 4 different pathways. We've color-coded them. The yellow pathway involves a heavy dose of college and career readiness through career and technical education. The green pathway shows how you can navigate our graduation requirements via dual credit coursework. The blue pathway identifies how you can take as many of the AP courses as you wish and still be able to achieve your academic goals. And we also highly emphasize the fact that we have a strong, rigorous, regular, traditional diploma that we offer. We recognize that not one path is exclusive, that a student may navigate multiple. So in the course description handbook, we've even color-coded all of our coursework. So you'll notice that that particular identifier marks an AP course in English Language Arts, where that one would identify a dual credit course in English Language Arts as well. So in doing so, we wanted to break this down for you to talk about what has happened with the Advanced Opportunity Suite that was opened in 2015 and how our programs have reacted to that starting in grade 7 and higher. If you aren't familiar, in 2015, the state of Idaho launched a goal to have a minimum of 60% of the populace have a collegiate degree or a certification. In doing so, they established an account, and that account is worth $4,125 for every 7th grader and higher in the state of Idaho. Now, whether that student uses that or not is really to their discretion, but it is there, and it has a lot of uses that can have. They can take any career and technical exam. They can take any AP exam. They can take any college entrance exam. And they can take dual credit coursework and other coursework as identified by the state. What that has done is that actually has created a lot of pinching within our system. But we are certainly not the district that is taking advantage of it to the most degree. This is a comparison of the 10 largest districts in the state of Idaho, and they are arranged by enrollment size. West Ada being the largest of our districts in the state, 27% of all students in West Ada School District are taking advantage of at least one advanced opportunity expenditure. We're right in the middle there, and about 21% of our students are taking advantage there. If you look off to the right-hand side, however, you also see the average expenditure by student. In that particular measure, we are third highest. So even though we don't have maybe as many students taking advantage of these offerings as other school districts, the students who are taking advantage are using a great deal of their monies to be able to do so. What are they taking is probably one of the first questions that you're thinking about. Well, the first kind of gives us a little glimpse as to how much has grown. If you start off to the very left-hand side, the blue line refers to the 2015 school year. That was the first year of launch. Look at what happened to the red line in 2016. The yellow line, 2017. The green, 2018. And the orange, this last school year. Our middle schools are still getting some use in advanced opportunities, again, starting in grades 7 and 8. But our high schools are certainly seeing the impact of these funds around. What are they taking? Well, the first option that you have in advanced opportunities is what is called an overload course. This is for a student at a school district. So for instance, my daughter is a 7th grader. If she takes a full course load at Canfield Middle School where she attends, anything above and beyond that is paid for by the state of Idaho. So she can take a high school course in 7th grade. A very common one is high school health. We teach 7th grade health, so many of the concepts are similar. So you do see some students taking those courses right away. That would be to maybe have a lighter load, put in an extra elective, or meet their graduation goals even earlier. We do have students who graduate as juniors now because they've met those requirements. As an overload course, you can see a majority of our students are taking health, followed by American government and United States history. Some other courses you can see off to the left-hand side as well. It's nice to highlight exploring computer science. About 8% of our students are taking that course, which we do offer within our district, but some prefer to take it in an online environment. But by far, the greatest reason why students are taking advantage of advanced opportunities is dual credit or dual enrollment. Specifically at our high schools, you can see this last year at Coeur d'Alene High School, 1,153 seats were taken by dual credit students. So that's not necessarily students, that's seats. So you could have one student taking multiple seats, and we do have some students who fully dual enroll at North Idaho College, for example. At Lake City High School, that number grew this last year to 1,375 total seats. And we expect, even though it's leveling off a little bit, we expect that the interest will continue to grow. North Idaho College certainly is very interested in growing that as well, and they actively market to our students. Right button.
Dr. Nelson, do you mind if I interrupt with a question?
I hope you would.
I think it kind of falls into that area, but I'm trying to think how to word this, but as a parent who has a high school student, It seems like we're still a little cloudy on our information around dual credit and AP.
Okay.
And that really the answer you get kind of depends who you ask within a building, right? And so I guess question one is how do we, because I know the chart you put up there with the different colors is kind of a newer chart for us. How are we sharing that information, or how can we share that information? Because I think sometimes students are hearing or parents are hearing the wrong information.
The greatest conduit that we have is through our counselors and teachers. And one of the things that we're seeing more often is that teachers are actually teaching dual credit classes. And we'll talk a little bit more about that along the way. But making sure that there's accurate information that's posted onto our district websites, making sure that we have accurate information going out. The course description handbook was, as you said, written so that we would have a little bit more continuity. But one of the questions that we have always struggled with is, are the right students getting into the right paths? Right. We've seen the great growth of dual credit, for example. Does that mean that those students are taking the best course that suits their future needs? If so, wonderful. But that also begs the fact that we have seen an inverse in our AP enrollment. So I think it goes back into that. But we have been working with our counselors. We meet with them quarterly, and that has been part of the discussion.
The other question I have, just in regards to kind of that relationship, right? We've seen dual credit increase and AP, for example, has decreased. Is kind of the funding mechanism of that, or the teacher? So our staff that teach a dual credit course on campus, do they get an additional, like a stipend from North Idaho College, let's say, if they're teaching a North Idaho College class?
The answer is yes, and I actually have a slide coming up that you've kicked off very well. If you don't mind, if I can answer that in the next slide, I think it'll be pretty obvious for you. Of our dual course providers, as you can imagine, University of Idaho does have a little bit of slice of the pie. College of Southern Idaho does. IDLA, the Idaho Digital Learning Academy, does. But by far, most of our students are taking advantage of the proximity with North Idaho College to do their dual credit coursework. And what courses are they taking? Well, here are the most popular courses that we have available. And to answer your question, Chair Morrisroe, can I ask you a question? What do all of those courses have in common? Hint, they're offered in 2 different locations.
They're in the schools.
These are our school district courses that our district has articulated with North Idaho College. So naturally, they're very popular. And yes, our classroom teachers do receive a portion of that enrollment back, and it fluctuates based on the content of the course. For instance, you can imagine a fine arts course. Well, they get a little bit greater portion of that enrollment because the content of the course involves activities and things that would require supplies, where some courses have a smaller payout back. It all comes back to the district, and then each course has an articulation agreement that identifies that dollar value that goes back to the building.
And can you give an example of, or maybe kind of a range? I guess I'm just wondering.
Of the $65 per student that they're paying, I would say it's about 20% or fewer dollars that are coming back to our teachers. So you could say about 18 to nothing per student enrollment. So if you look at a course up at the very top, which is speech, we had 164 enrollments this last year. You multiply that in. Well, the speech teacher who would normally be getting, say, $100 to $150 in a classroom budget may have more access. In some cases, it's not much at all. But you can see up at the very top, a lot of the courses that we have are our career and technical education courses, Word, Excel, PowerPoint. They use some of those monies to update their labs. So yes, it has been incentivizing to some of our classroom teachers, but that also begs the question of whether we're putting the eggs in the right basket.
So I just want to make sure so you're saying it's maybe $10 or $15 per student?
Per student.
That goes to the teacher. So if they have a class of 30, it's a few $100s.
Could be.
Could be.
It depends on the course, and we can give you a range more specifically. I can look at some of the articulation agreements and put out a little table for you.
Yeah, I would just be interested. That's less than I thought it was.
It's
I see
not
why
much at all.
NIC wants to have these on our campus. If they're, I know what they charge a credit hour, right? Or these are different,
Still
right?
$65 a credit.
Oh, it's $65 a credit.
So it's not
Okay.
exponential by
Right.
any means. That's capped at the state level.
Okay.
But certainly for a student who's got a bank account of $4,125 and to be able
nice.
to do that at $65 a credit, is not bad.
Mm-hmm. So it's not as, I don't know why I thought it was thousands of dollars, and so I guess my concern was, we've created a monetary incentive for teachers to teach dual enrollment, and there is. It's much more minute than I thought it was, but I guess that was a concern I'd have when you see AP numbers going down and dual enrollment numbers going up.
And with your permission, what I could do is work to, as I said, create a little bit of a table which shows the range of that dollar amount and estimate it out. I could certainly work with Mrs. Ebner to come up with a very specific number, since all of those monies are actually collected by the district and then pushed back to the buildings. I don't get involved with the fiscal side of it as much, but I would have to be able to do so. Are you ready to transition into AP? Certainly glad to stand for any more questions that you may have there. But we're very excited about our AP scores this year. In fact, we hope that you saw the opportunities on social media when we were putting stakes and signs throughout the entire district. 56 students this year received a perfect score on their exam. That is up from 42 this last year, so we had a few more homes to be able to visit. In fact, we had one student who had 4 perfect scores on their exams. It was an incredible lady to meet, and she was very humble about the whole thing. We had 12 students who had two 5s, and 4 students received 3 5s on their assessments. Overall, 92.45% of all students who took an AP course this year took the exam. So that's also a very good thing to see, that we're really preparing students well along the way. Of the 30 courses that we offer district-wide, 24 of those courses showed a score increase, and 20 of our 30 met or exceeded the national average this year for those courses. So we did see some very good scores along the way. In fact, we've kind of created an inverse pyramid here. The blue lines off to the left-hand side represent the 2018 school year, so 2 years ago, where last year was the 2019. And you've noticed that we've kind of moved away from the left side of the pyramid where the scores were 1 and 2 and 3, and now added those over to the higher levels off to the right-hand side. More students are getting 4s and 5s than we have not seen before. So even if a student doesn't get a perfect score, we've seen general scores increase as well. And that's for our work led by Dr. Cottle and our AP teachers, who we bring together twice a year to look at all of their score reports, look at their longitudinal reports, get them to training, and make sure that they have an emphasis on supporting students. But what has happened is that we have seen a decrease of enrollment as well as the number of examinations in AP. Just a quick reminder, what year did the Advanced Opportunities Suite of funding come into play? I know it's late. 2015. That was the highest enrollment that we had actually seen in our AP courses. Since that funding has come into play, we've seen more of a squeeze on our AP enrollment as dual credit has risen. Down from a high of 2015 of 1,046 total students enrolled down to 546 this last year. But again, the good thing has happened is that the narrowing of the red and the blue bars indicates that the students who are in our AP courses are being well prepared to take their exams, and as their scores just showed, that our students are doing well in those courses.
I got a question though. If we look at the percent that we're decreasing annually, it looks like it's a program or an option that may not be available in the next 5 to 10 years if we stayed on a steady trajectory going downward. I mean, we're half of what we were 4 years ago. Do you worry that our enrollment's slipping enough that we should start talking about the viability of AP in the long run?
It's hard for me to answer that question. We have never surveyed our students to find out, when a student has a choice between AP or dual credit, what they perceive to be better and for what. We've tried to do a very good job of showing why an AP course has value for students, and specifically looking at their four-year plans, looking at their college and career goals, and making sure that the courses are available that they need. Dr. Cook?
One of the things I would add to that answer is that if you look at the number of students that are taking the exam versus the number of the students who are taking the course, that number is much more stable. And I think as long as there is a demand for kids that wish to take the test, there will be kids that will take the class. There is a financial competition here. So I think one of the things that you'll see, and I this is anecdotal, I don't have data to support this, but AP has kind of found a stable home across the country. There is a very strong but smaller group of students that find the value in AP, but it's a very stable percentage of the student body that finds use in it. AP is still recognized. Now, we'll see if it continues, but AP currently is still recognized nationally and even internationally in some regards as a good measure of academic rigor. That's the thing that I would take away from this graph, is that there seems to be a stabilizing of the number of kids that are taking the test. The downward slope of the kids that are taking the course may be more an indication of whether or not it's a fit for them.
I think I would add to that, there's also more data coming that the students that are taking AP courses are performing better post-secondary. And I wonder if it's a cultural conversation, and maybe that's what Chair Morrisroe was talking about. I know having a freshman and they meet in their, ASB groups, the word on the street is take a dual credit course. It's easier and you can get credit, versus the conversation being take an AP course, you get a 3 and you can still get college credit and it's still paid for because we're providing the exams to be paid for, just like the $4,000 for dual enrollment. So, my daughter really wasn't even aware that it would be worth college credit just from interacting with your peers and leaders at the school. So I think we have to decide when we do portraits of a graduate, what do we value, and does this program offer benefit to our district long term? I think it does, and it saddens me to see the numbers sliding down. I wonder, with just some basic understanding for our student body on what this program could provide, we might see numbers increase again. I don't know. It's something we could do surveying as we move forward, but I would be curious.
I think a couple things, just as you look at the blue lines on there, that I think, and Mike, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think 2015 was the year IB went away. Is that correct? So that was one reason we saw
a few years before that. Coeur d'Alene High School had collapsed the program in 12, and then last graduate from Lake City High School was in 15. So yes, you would see an inverse relationship in the ending of that program.
And then I believe, in that 15, because that was the year I think we were recognized by
Gastron Caperton Award from College Board.
Not Colin Kaepernick, right, which is what I think I said last time. Was, I don't want to say self-select, because I think they still can choose, right? But there was a kind of a big push on, everyone, at least every student should take an AP course.
There
was kind of a push at that time. And I think what we found was that it's not for everybody. And so I think that's why you've seen maybe the numbers, part of the reason.
Could be.
We saw 20% drop this year, though.
Right. I think if you look at what Dr. Cook's saying, is that red line is, it's not completely stable, but it's fairly consistent if you look over 5 years.
But our population's grown, so.
Yeah, true.
So with that, I'll tip it back to you. I'll get a little bit more information on some of the funding components of dual credit, but what else can I do for you?
Is there any financial incentive to a teacher who teaches an AP course?
At this point, we have not incentivized those courses in any way.
Because I assume there's more requirement for them, right? They have to go.
Is.
There's some training that they do every so often, I believe, right? That
But
they have to
I
complete.
will tell you, as a former AP and IB teacher myself, there is a great deal of joy in taking students on that ride.
Sure.
In being with students who are solely focused on their goals and to be able to help them there. And I'm not saying that that doesn't happen in all the courses, but it's certainly a privilege to be able to do that. There are extra requirements, but it is an opportunity for professional growth also. The district does invest quite a bit in our AP teachers, so whether they might be not receiving it in a paycheck, they are certainly receiving more opportunities than we would afford just about everybody. But at this point, there is no financial incentive for our AP teachers.
Do you have any preliminary data on what our enrollment numbers for AP are for next year, since all of our high schoolers have registered?
I do have some preliminary numbers, and we do see the decline continue. It is not steep. It's about a 3% decrease right now. But those are always very difficult, because what ends up happening is that even if a student does make a course request, if for whatever reason the other components of their schedule don't match up and the AP course is left off of their schedule for now, they may have to make a hard decision once they meet with their counseling team and say, no, I really do want to be in that course. We can certainly provide that for you in a future board memo, just to give you an update as to where that graph stands.
And I wonder if we need to survey our students and see, maybe the AP courses we're offering they're not interested in. Maybe they're different, because there are many AP course offerings. Maybe it's switching up what we're offering, or asking them, what would you like to see as far as AP course offerings?
Okay. Anything else? Thank you very much.
Okay, we're almost there, folks. Next up, and this was a board reports information item that we added in because we received some information from the Hayden Canyon Charter folks with their transfer petition. As you know, they, I guess, are petitioning the Idaho Charter Commission. And so they sent us over some information. We kind of threw this in at the last minute because we just received it late last week. And we're not necessarily looking for specific comments, but I think looking to guide administration whether we want to comment or we want administration to comment. It's part of our, we have an opportunity, I guess, to weigh in on their petition that'll go to the Charter Commission. There's about a 30-day window, so I think comments need to be in around the end of the month or the very beginning of September if we want to commit. So that's all this discussion topic's about. And I don't know, I think it was some of the information was in our packet, and I think Lynn sent out a link that went to their, they had kind of two documents, a summary document and then a lengthy document that had all the appendices in it.
Aren't they going to
I don't think there's any way that we could stop it. No, this would just be a comment, whether it could be a comment in support, it could be a comment of concern. I think it's just an opportunity. And I don't know, but I believe in years past, probably like comment on developments, and I don't know, so this is probably an answer I shouldn't say this, but my guess would be, a lot of things are going on. The district probably hasn't commented in the past, because we didn't really comment on developments previously, right? And that's been a change this year. And so because of the kind of tight window, we threw it on here just so we could have the discussion. Do we even want to? Is it important to us? Is there things in there? And like I said, that comment could be positive. It could be supportive. It could be concern. It could be, neutral. It doesn't have to necessarily be that we're trying to stop it. I don't think we have that authority.
That's what
we don't have that authority.
And I didn't think we did. I just wondered what our role is, as I'm trying to understand our role.
So since the area impact is both the Coeur d'Alene School District and Lakeland School District, we both have the opportunity to comment. The school will actually be located within the Lakeland School District boundary. It's not in our boundary. But the way we're impacted, it's basically right on our boundary. And they've created an attendance zone. And it must be for enrollment purposes, kind of who gets preference. But I'm not even sure what the purpose of their attendance zone is. But their attendance zone goes all the way to about Honeysuckle Avenue, I believe is what they show there. So, it goes pretty far into our district.
Yeah. I had a question primarily, and Steve, you might be able to figure this out, is, they make mention that they're reverting back to the original their original primary zone in the 2017 petition, and that is a change. And so I was curious if we were able to get any information on why they're reverting back to the 2017 proposed zone. Is it something happening with Lakeland? And has Lakeland taken up this issue?
Yeah, so we talked to them, and this zone actually goes back, from what I understand from our contacts in Lakeland, all the way back to 2012. And they had expanded the zone when they were trying to get Lakeland to be their authorizer. Now that they're going back to the Charter Commission, they're going to go back to the original zone because, and this is my understanding of the explanation, is that the charter is the Commission is looking for a zone that has a density of population that makes it sustainable as a school, but is also not so large that it makes it geographically difficult for kids to get to the school. And so that pushes it back into a tighter, denser location. We ran the numbers on it, and currently just the number of students in our school district that live in that zone that would be K-5 next year are 695 students. And we also asked, they've got them posted. Thank you, guys. We also asked them to run the numbers, for Jay to run the numbers of the kids that are currently attending NEXA, which would be the school in that zone that is the current zone of NEXA, lives entirely in that overlay of attendance zone, and 201 of the 318 students that currently attend NEXA would be inside that zone of the proposed location. And so our conversation today with Lakeland School District about why this has changed, modified, because at one point I saw a projected enrollment zone, which I think is a good way to put it, is that it's not really, it's a charter, right? There are people that are going to be driving across town to take their kid there if they're so inclined. But the commission requests that if the commission is going to be the authorizer. And right now, my understanding is Lakeland is trying to get out of the business of being their authorizer, and Hayden Canyon is also seeking the charter commission to become the authorizer. That's why the boundaries have changed.
I think what worries me further is that if you read further in their proposal, they have accepted students, they have a dedicated enrollment, and they have a wait list that would generate more students. And if you look at where those students are from and which district is affected, it is our district. And so it's a conversation I think we need more information on, and we need to weigh in on it. And I'm not saying I don't support them, because I think we don't have the information to say that yet, but it would dramatically impact our district. And I'd like to see some numbers generated as far as FTEs. And I mean, we're talking a lot of student enrollment. And
Yeah, 700 of our students currently in that zone. 700 of next year's K-5. So assuming they opened next year, potentially 695 total students in that carve-out space. Not saying they're all going there. Just
right. Do we know though who's even enrolled?
Yes, you read. They have enrollment
from
accepted.
Our district. I mean, we know that kids have applied. They've been accepted. My question is, do we know who those kids are and
so
where they're from?
If you go to their website, you can see they don't disclose the name of the student, but they state the location or district that student is from. And I don't have the math in front of me, but I would say it was greater than 80% are from our district. So these aren't students that are from Lakeland that are seeking an alternate plan. These are our students. And so I would like to get more information. Why are our families looking, for something different? And we have avoided having this conversation, but I think it's an important one. And even if it's the conversation of partnering with them, do they, there's a lot of options of different ways that this could go. And if they're seeking an independent charter, I don't know, I think it's the start of a conversation that can open up lots of avenues.
I don't disagree. I also think it's something that Flo needs to know about, because it's clearly going to have, I mean, if 80% of their kids are pulled from ours, that would have a huge, I think that would have a huge difference in recommendations about future planning and what that might look like.
So there's a 4-week window that we can submit whatever that might look like to the Charter Commission, and when they hear this.
Do you administratively do you have the time and the resources where you could review their application and see if there's areas that we wanted to comment on it, or no?
We could. We got this. Well, we got this on Thursday, right? We got this Thursday night at 7:00, and we could give some analysis on this and provide that to you guys. But the piece of this that is like, there's a lot on the plate right now. So yeah, we can do some things, and it'll be preliminary because they're not gonna necessarily tell us everything. But it'll be a job.
I think one thing that concerned me, and I briefly looked at it, I wouldn't say it concerned me, but I think we may want to comment on is, I mean, I think if the demand's there, then the demand's there, and if people want to go there, that's certainly their choice. And I think there is some merit, or we should know why, right? If people are unsatisfied with our schools and our offerings, then we should know, right? But some of their information that they have in there is, as far as providing why there's demand, I think there's inaccuracies with our data. For instance, it recognized Dalton Elementary as a capacity of 300 students, but they had 425, and so they were kind of indicating overcrowding, and that we could help alleviate overcrowding and those sorts of things, which there could be some of that, but that's not the correct capacity for Dalton, and I think almost every school they listed wasn't the capacities that we use in their charting. So, because part of it is they're making a case, right, of that there's demand and there's need, and there very well may be. But I think if they're representing our information, it should be accurate.
I do know that the longest waiting lists were for middle school so far. If you go and look at where their waiting list is, and in my 5th graders class, 3 kids raised their hand and said they were going here. They're not going to because they're not opening this year, but this conversation's been happening for quite some time now, and they still have to get approval, so nothing is set in stone. But I don't know. I think there's opportunities here, and just the beginning of the conversation.
What kind of opportunities you talk about? I mean, I'm not real crazy about the whole idea. I'll be honest and lay my cards on the table. I'm not terribly enthusiastic about this charter school, but it is going to, that's why I asked what our role is. It's going to happen whether we like it or not, it sounds like. But I do think we do need to see how it's going to impact the district. That I agree. I agree, is it in a positive way? Is it going to relieve some enrollment issues, or is it going to be in a negative way? I don't know. I just, this has been boiling for a long time. I first heard of this thing when I came on the board, 6 years ago. I guess it's finally getting to the point where it's actually in front of the Charter Commission. So
they have a board, and
it's taken a long time, but I'm just not enthusiastic about it. But I'm not going to say I'm going to oppose it.
I think opportunities, one, would be we could learn some information from the families that are applying, but 2, have we had a conversation about blending our district? Do we have the ability and the capacity to take on a charter school? That's a conversation that we haven't had. We're working on developing. I'm not saying we're having that now. I'm saying you asked me what opportunities are there, and there's opportunities to grow relationships with charter schools. I'm not saying how or under what umbrella, but this needs to be a partnering conversation. That's all I'm saying. And so whatever opportunities that allows, we need to all work together, because there's only one source of funding. And so
I was just going to say that something similar to the lines that Lisa was saying, in that I feel like it's an opportunity. We all know that we don't have space once we have a brand new building to put kids in. And so I see it as an opportunity for our kids to be put in a place that has maybe a different route, similar to what charter, our current charter academy does, similar to what K-Tech and Venture offer our kids. And so I don't necessarily see it as like an attack on us and taking our kids. I see it as an opportunity for our kids. I just think that we should probably get educated about it. It may be a lost opportunity for having partnered in some fashion by no fault of anybody sitting here, but maybe we need to have some dialogue and start talking and see what we can develop.
So let me talk about part of what may be seen as lost opportunity. My understanding is that part of the expectation for they have ground, and the ground that they have access where they could eventually build a school currently is outside of our district. And so they're writing this proposal from the lens of that they're going to stay centered on the ground that they currently have. That is the kind of the linchpin of why they're located where they're located. Because it was in the Lakeland School District, they pursued that for a while. I think they pursued the Charter Commission first, then they went to Lakeland. Now they're going back to the Charter Commission. That seems to be the path that I've understood it to be. And so I think what I would like to know, and I've heard all kinds of feedback, which is great, is specifically in the next 4 weeks, do you want us to put together data for you guys to make a decision that we could get together what we could in the next, essentially a couple of weeks, so you guys have a little bit of time to process, provide you what information we can gather about the set of circumstances that would be in addition to or a supplemental of this report, and provide that information to you guys so that you can decide to make a decision on whether or not there's interest in opining to the Charter Commission, because ultimately that's what's being asked right now, not whether or not we believe in charter as a philosophical approach, or if it's even an option for helping mitigate overcrowding. That's a whole nother conversation. Right now we've got a 4-week window of time that we'd like some direction if you guys would like information on that. And I think right now that's the thing that would be priority one for us to decide.
I think you nailed it. That's what I'd like to.
Impact information. How, if they open and they use this primary attendance zone, how does that impact our district financially? Really, is what I would like to know.
And I agree with Casey's comments that if there's inaccurate data from our schools, that should be corrected.
I think I agree with all of that. But at the same time, I know it's a busy time of year where we've got the work plan going, we've got a lot of stuff going on. So I think, as Tom probably said, our comments are probably like our comments to the city. They're like our comments to the city. They may not have a lot of impact when it comes to ultimately the decision, right? And so, if you would ask me Thursday night or Friday night, I would have said, absolutely we need to. I would say right now I'm kind of maybe, or I just don't think we need to spend a lot of, and by we, I mean, you and your staff need to spend a lot of time on it, because there's a lot of things going on right now that I'm just concerned, are we spinning our wheels a little bit just to, I think it's worth looking at, and then I think we kind of go from there.
It could have a significant impact on the district, though. Significant. Positively, as Jennifer was talking about, or negatively, either way.
For what it's worth, having worked with the commission and seen a little bit of their feedback, I do think that they would look pretty critically at whatever we offered. I genuinely do, just with the limited exposure that I have had. It's not a huge bureaucracy. It actually strikes me as being small and very micromanaging. So that's what I would say.
Did we give you any direction there? You want to summarize what you? I saw you typing away there. Just make sure.
This is what I think I'm hearing. Right. We're stretched pretty thin. but we can pull together some things on potential financial, saying it plays out according to what they would propose without us doing a lot of research. We could probably put together an impact report of what we would anticipate this would look like financially, potentially what schools it could draw from, and then and in this short of time, there's no way to do a real deep analysis on that. But assuming this does, they're going to have to get through the Charter Commission before this were to continue. That would be something that we would run through with our analytic team when they get here to talk about boundaries. They're opening, if we're talking about a 1-year impact versus an ongoing impact, eventually they hope to open up to 900 students, right? And so what does that look like if 60% of those students are coming out of our district, right? You start doing the math on that, and the impact, whether, we don't even put a qualifier on it and say whether it's positive or negative, it's obviously an impact. If we're talking about pulling 600 kids out of a K-8 and potentially them coming back as high school, theoretically, right? So,
I think eventually, if you look at that development, it's 600 plus homes, right? Maybe
1,800 homes.
1,800 homes.
1,800 homes they're talking about over there.
Eventually it build out. And, that's, we talked briefly about, so Coeur d'Alene Place is like 1,400 homes, and we have
almost one kid per house right now, right, Jeff?
So like 1,200 students come out of 1,400 homes. So
1.16 at
more
Coeur
than
d'Alene
enough
Place.
demand just out of the neighborhood once it's built out and over time. They're doing some
There's plat work going right now.
Plat work
Yeah.
right now. They're in front of the city of Coeur d'Alene or city of Hayden to change a few things, I think, in their plat.
Yeah, is that good? Like I don't expect a big. Okay, I think I understand.
Okay, a couple of upcoming dates. Hopefully by tomorrow evening we'll know what we're going to do in August for a workshop. September 6th will be emergency levy meeting if necessary, but that is a Friday. Yeah, by statute it has to happen happens at the end of the first week of school, or it's a goofy thing. We have not set a time on that yet. Usually it's kind of
Usually around
midday.
noon, isn't
Yeah,
it?
to
Yeah.
11, 12-ish,
Yeah.
if we've had them. And then, because the Labor Day holiday, our meeting falls on the second Monday next month, so we're September 9th. And then we'll be looking to get something out on a retreat for sometime in September as well.
What was that potential date for the workshop at Jen?
I think it's August 26th is the date. I'll tell you really quick though. Just a second.
Isn't it August 23rd? Lynn's.
That's a Friday.
Oh, I think it was a Friday. Isn't it? I don't know. How about we'll figure it out tomorrow. We ran long. I'm
gone the 19th.
That's when she was going.
I'll be
All right.
gone on the 23rd
Yeah,
of August.
Okay. So maybe it is the 26th. We'll figure it out tomorrow. How about that?
I think it is the
And
26th.
with that,
Taylor back in.
meeting is adjourned if we're done. Are we done? Okay, meeting adjourned.